Hey guys, I'm Yuruzi. Part 4 of What If Naruto Was the Red Flash. Naruto finds out about Uzumaki clan when he was 4 years old. Naruto swears to rebuild the home of his clan and finds all the family he has left. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 24, Return to Konoha. Naruto. The sun started shining over the mountain, bringing light over the village hidden in the leaf. The villagers had just woken up, some had started their daily routine, opening shops, restaurants, some shinobis going to their new missions. 2 shinobi made their way to the gates of Konoha to look for anyone coming inside and going outside. Close to the walls of the village were 2 figures walking towards it. One was Jiraiya, who kept his gaze at Naruto. His student and godson had been dead silent since yesterday, and it was worrying him. He tried to start any conversation with his favorite redhead, but he would either ignore him or when he asked him, he would make a short and straightforward answer indicating that he wasn't in the mood for a conversation. Jiraiya knew his godson wasn't looking forward to it, but he hoped that 4 years had been enough for the villagers to forget him and possibly not be hostile towards him any longer. From what he had heard from his spies and he himself, the chances were low. Villagers were still celebrating the Kyuubi's defeat and the day the demon died. Just the thought that they celebrated made him sick, and he couldn't possibly understand how people could go so low. He sighed and looked to his left. Naruto kept his gaze at the gates getting closer, his red hair reaching his shoulders. He wore a new jacket, black in color, with a red phoenix symbol on the back. The same symbol that is in his sword, the eye of the phoenix, looked like Uzumaki's symbol. Beneath the jacket, he wore a tight white shirt with the symbol of fire in the chest. Despite the jacket, his muscles from training could clearly be seen, and everyone that was a shinobi and even civil people could see Naruto was strong. He kept his chest high, and his sword tightened on his hips. He stood 140 centimeters tall, which was tall for an 8-year-old kid. His blue eyes looked brighter from the sun. He wore bandages under his clothes on his elbows and forearm. A seal on both of his shoulders that couldn't be seen from the naked eye. His weights are still on his body, 350 pounds on his legs, and 330 on his arms. Jiraiya had tried to tell him that he didn't need that much weight but was like talking to a wall. Hell, even a wall would understand at some point. Naruto had completed his elemental manipulation last month, which meant he could finally start training on some powerful jutsu, like that his mother left for him. Jiraiya-sensei told him that Rasengan wasn't a finished jutsu. His father had never completed it. Naruto wondered if he could complete it and make a more powerful jutsu. The technique was already dangerous and could quickly kill someone if is used in vital areas. But if he added more into it, he could make it to be an S-rank jutsu. Before he had left, Naruto had given Asha a copy of Uzumaki's style, Phoenix. Naruto was walking with Tojiji towards the lake that would lead them outside the village. Behind him came Fu and Asha. Naruto felt horrible to leave Asha. She was an Uzumaki like him. She and Fu understood him, they both knew his pain, and now he was leaving them so that he could go to a village he didn't like. Naruto knew the Hidden Leaf village had good shinobi, but still, he couldn't see the village as his home, and he knew that would never happen. He wondered what Uzumaki was like before it was destroyed mercilessly, how it looked. How were people there? Would they see him as normal or just like in the Hidden Leaf? Naruto didn't know, and there were no pictures or anything anywhere of the village to understand how it looked. Naruto turned to look at Asha and Fu, who gave him a sad smile. Naruto had told both Asha and Fu that the next time they met, they would make plans how to rebuild Uzumaki. Fu had agreed with it. She told them that Taki wasn't home to her and would happily follow her 2 only friends everywhere in the world. Naruto wanted more than anything to rebuild his homeland. Still, he needed to be strong. First, Naruto knew he wasn't weak now, but he was nothing compared to the likes of Hokage Jiji, Tojiji, and other Kage around the elemental nations. Ashara-chan and Fu-chan, we will soon meet again, Naruto promised and handed Asha a red scroll that could only be opened by Uzumaki blood. With the help of Jiraiya-sensei, Asha was almost done with level V. Tojiji had left her enough books to reach and complete level X. Asha smiled back and grabbed the scroll before hugging him tightly, much to his surprise, her fingers softly touching his red hair. Naruto couldn't help but blush by this. We will meet again, Naruto-kun, she whispered and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek that made Naruto turn red like his hair. Asha giggled and tried to fight her own blush from her porch. She grabbed a purple scroll and gave it to Naruto. she winked at him and took a step away so that Fu could say goodbye. Finally managing to catch his breath, he turned to look at Fu. Her orange eyes looked beautiful. Wait, beautiful? Stop it, Naruto, he thought to himself. Naruto had decided to give Fu the scroll how to do Rasengan since she had high wind affinity. He was about to give it to her when she jumped on him and hugged him tightly, rubbing her cheek against his, making him blush even more. I know we will meet again soon, Naruto-kun, and don't forget we are friends, she shouted the last part. Naruto could see the sadness behind her beautiful orange eyes. Yes, we are friends, Fu, we will always be and will always rely on each other, Naruto stated. Fu blushed at his words and gave him a big smile, and her eyes were smiling too. Her eyes looked at his blue ones and then gave him a quick kiss on his cheek that had the exact same effect as Asha. Naruto started rubbing his hair nervously and avoiding their faces while Jiraiya was slightly giggling at the scene in front of him. Young love, Jiraiya thought proudly for his godson. Not even 10 years old, and he has started stealing the hearts of beautiful girls. Imagine when he reaches 14 years old. Jiraiya thought, rubbing his hands together. Naruto grabbed his scroll and gave it to Fu, and she looked at the scroll smiling and looked back at him. She then grabbed a scroll from her backpack and gave it to Naruto but put a finger in her lips. This is my strongest jutsu that Chomei taught me. I hope you like it, she whispered. Naruto felt happy from the gift. That filled him with happiness. Thank you for your gifts Asha-chan and Fu-chan. Naruto thanked them. Is nothing Naruto-kun, Asha replied slightly, looking downwards and not looking at his eyes with a blush on her face. Fu thanked him as well. It had been 1 month since he had left Taki. The jutsus they had given him were Uzumaki style, water flash, A rank, low S rank. The jutsu could collect the water close to the user, then threw at the enemy with fast speed. The speed enough made water penetrate anything, even metal. The water could easily reach low Kage level speed if used with wind release. Wind style, crumble wind. The jutsu needed both wind and earth release to work. It creates a large wind area that could be thrown that destroys trees and ground everything in his way. The jutsu could also be used to develop small wind blades inside to slice the enemy apart. The ground close and inside would crumble almost to the point to become like sand. High A rank, high S rank. Cost, low Kage level chakra. Naruto still hadn't started to try and learn any of them. Jiraiya-sensei told him that the last month left, he was forbidden to train and rest. Spend his time having fun and feeling like an actual child. Naruto finds it funny, as long as he can remember, he never saw himself as a child. He could only keep his weights and make them heavier if he wished but not any other kind of training. Naruto at first had complained but then quickly accepted when even Kurama told him that he needed to rest. Naruto had finished level V in Fuinjutsu, and now he needed to complete level 6. He was looking forward to reaching level 8 since once he completed it, he could start training his Hiraishin. Naruto knew that technique was what made his father. The yellow flash flee on sight in his bingo book and SS rank. Naruto had asked Kurama what kind of level were Hashirama and Madara on their prime. I don't know exactly how your rating works, but if your old man was SS rank, then Hashirama and Madara were SSS rank. Kurama had replied with venom when he mentioned the strongest Uchiha to have ever existed and the first Hokage. Jiraiya suddenly stopped walking and turned his head to Naruto. The young redhead stopped as well and turned to look at Tojiji and wondered why he stopped. This is where we part ways, Jiraiya stated, looking at Naruto, who raised an eyebrow in confusion. Why is that? I thought you would come with me to explain everything to Jiji, Naruto said, glancing at the village ahead of them and then turning to the old Sannin again. I'm sure you can do that yourself. I have something important to do, Jiraiya stated, thinking that now he would find Tsunade and tell her about Naruto. He hoped to find her soon and wondered what she would do once she understood the truth about Naruto. He hoped she would find in her heart to return back to the village, but if she did and saw how the village treated Naruto. The young redhead didn't really understand his reasons. He could feel there was something Tojiji was hiding, but he knew was nothing to worry about. He shrugged his shoulders and decided to ignore it. Very well, Jiraiya-sensei, and thank you for these 4 awesome years. Naruto thanked him and hugged him tightly. Jiraiya was slightly taken aback by his hug, but he quickly returned it and rubbed his hair. Is nothing Naruto, Jiraiya replied. Naruto smiled, hearing his words and pulled away. Wish me good luck, Naruto said before turning to walk towards the gates of the village. Jiraiya chuckled at his words. Good luck, he whispered once Naruto was out of the ear hearing area. He turned around and quickly shunshin away. Naruto soon reached the gates. He looked at the walls and wondered why they looked smaller, but overall, nothing had changed. He took a deep breath and started walking again. Soon, he reached the entrance, immediately stopped by two shinobi who guarded the gates. Naruto could feel two hidden ANBU in each side of the gate. Sighing, he walked towards them. "Who are you that you want to enter?" the man asked kindly, looking at his face. The man could have sworn he had seen that face before. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm supposed to meet Hokage-sama today," saying that no voice could be heard. His pencil fell to the ground, and he looked at Naruto in the face. Both he and his friend saw the 3 whiskers on each side of his face. He looked taller and more muscular, but the whiskers and the red hair were a straight giveaway. "Oh, you have grown up." "Ah, you can enter, of course," the man replied with a small smile, happy that the poor kid was alright and wasn't truly dead as the village celebrated. Naruto felt his honesty and smiled at both of them. Turning to the village, he started walking forward. People were everywhere on the roads. After a few minutes of walking, Naruto could notice some people were giving him glances of curiosity and a hint of anger. Naruto sighed, thinking that wouldn't take long now. Soon everyone would know that Naruto was back. He gave it 2 days at max before the whole village found out about it. He looked up at the Hokage faces in the mountain, and his eyes looked at his father. How much he wished for him to be with him. As he kept walking, Naruto passed the academy. He could feel the chakra of the students in there, and what caught his attention was that none of them was even Chunin level except for the teachers. He knew he had a huge amount of chakra because of his Uzumaki blood and Kurama, but still, most of the Genin didn't even have a Genin level of chakra below that. He wondered why and hoped that the academy wouldn't be a total waste of time. Deciding to ignore it, he kept walking towards the Hokage Tower. Naruto wondered how Gigi looked now, or maybe he looked the exact same but slightly older. He then wondered about his apartment and if anyone was ever there to clean or it had done nothing but collect dust for 4 years, or maybe someone had just put it in flames. Naruto didn't know, but he knew he could use shadow clones to clean the house if needed. And maybe would style to build one, but that would raise too many eyebrows. Walking closer, Naruto knew some villagers were following and talking to other people. Some started pointing their fingers towards him, probably thinking he couldn't see them. Getting bored by this, he jumped up and landed on the rooftop of the nearest building. Taking a deep breath of fresh air, he ran with speed towards the Hokage Tower. He soon reached the tower. Walking upstairs, he soon reached a room that the secretary worked. Naruto could feel 2 ANBU inside the room, but he ignored them. The woman saw him and stood up. "What can I help you with?" she asked kindly, but couldn't help but notice the look of the warrior on his face. Naruto turned to look at her. He smiled and decided to act innocently. "I'm supposed to meet Hokage-sama today," he replied, not wanting to stay longer here. "I'm sorry, but the Hokage is a very busy man, and you have to make an appointment to see him," said the secretary politely. "Well, the Hokage will be expecting me, as he knows I'm arriving here," spoke Naruto, although the secretary did not look convinced as to what he was saying. "Look, could you just to him and say that Naruto is here, he will know who I'm, and if he doesn't, then I leave." "Okay," said Naruto as he didn't want to waste any time trying to convince the women. Her eyes widened slightly at the name. "Very well then," said the secretary with a sigh, but when she entered the Hokage office and told him that a young red-haired boy carrying a katana on his back named Naruto was outside his office, he wanted to speak to him and to say that he was expecting him. The secretary was surprised to see an eager and happy look appear on the old Hokage's face, where he quickly called his ANBU that was hidden in his room rafters and told them to leave. After that, he then told her to tell the ANBUs that were outside his room to go and said to her that she was dismissed for the rest of the day and told Naruto to come in. Naruto walked inside and saw his Gigi smiling behind the desk. "Naruto, my boy, is good to see you," he said happily. Naruto hugged him. He pulled away to give him a good look. He saw that Naruto had grown. His face looked sharper, almost like his father, his blue eyes like the ocean. The old Hokage noticed he looked slightly larger and wondered how much Naruto had trained throughout the years. "It's good to see you too, Gigi," Naruto replied. His eyes glanced at his father's photo before turning to the old Hokage, something that he noticed. "I take you have grown stronger," the old Hokage said with a chuckle, but at the same time could feel the aura of power surrounding Naruto. The kid in front of him wasn't an ordinary genin. He wondered how strong Naruto was now since Jiraiya had been pretty vague when talking about his training. Soon Naruto sat close to his desk, and they started talking about what he had done the last 4 years. His thoughts about Mount Myaboku, if he made any friends. The old Hokage was impressed when Naruto told him that he had reached level 6 in Fuinjutsu and wondered that it would be only a matter of time until he reaches level X to reach the same level as Jiraiya. Naruto then went on and talked about how peaceful and quiet Mount Myaboku was and how friendly the toads there were. He spoke about his visit to Taki, his friendship with Fu and Ashera. Sarutobi was impressed to hear there were other Uzumaki out there. He was happy to hear that Naruto had new friends. He needed them more than anyone else. After a long talk that lasted 2 hours, Sarutobi grabbed a key and a note from his desk and gave it to Naruto. "These are the keys to your apartment. The letter is for the teacher of your class. Gave him to explain to him why you will start today," Hiruzen said. Naruto nodded his head and stood up. "See you later, Gigi," Naruto said, waving his hand at him, and soon jumped from the window, much to the annoyance of the old Hokage, who hoped that Jiraiya hadn't shown his books to Naruto. Naruto! He was walking through the village towards his apartment. It was probably around 11 of the day. The teaching had already started, and Naruto knew it would be a waste of time to go to the academy now, so he decided to go tomorrow morning like everyone else. While walking, Naruto wondered what they would be taught them in the academy, and he hoped they would teach them about Fuinjutsu. He soon reached the apartment. Reaching his floor, he saw the door to his apartment had words written all over it. Even the wall close to the door had words written: Demon, Child of Sin, Killer, Burn in Hell, Kyubi. Naruto sighed and opened the door. "What a warm welcome," he murmured, walking inside. He saw the whole place looked messed up, probably because of the last accident, since after he got beaten, he never returned to his apartment to fix the mess they had made. Sighing, he crossed his fingers, and 10 clones suddenly showed up. "Fix the house," he said, and the clones started working while Naruto decided to visit his favorite restaurant until they were done. Naruto left the apartment and made his way towards Ichiraka Ramen, and he wondered how they would treat him. They treated him well last time. He soon reached the restaurant, ignoring the annoying glances from the villagers. Walking inside, he saw who he thought was Ayam. She looked taller now and probably around her 14. She looked more beautiful. Ayam noticed the new customer and turned to look at him, but her eyes immediately widened when he saw the familiar red hair and the whiskers on his face. "Naruto, is that you?" she almost shouted happily. He was about to reply when his head suddenly got gripped by 2 hands and got in a bear hug from Ayam. "It's so good to see you, Naruto," she said, hugging him tightly. Naruto tried to talk but couldn't. "I see if can. Bree," he tried to say, and she understood his position and let him go. Naruto gasped for air, his hand on his chest. "I'm sorry, Naruto," she quickly apologized. Finally catching his breath, he shook his head. "Don't worry, Ayam, it is good to see you too," he replied, smiling at her, and his eyes looked around in time to see the old man walking towards them. His eyes still closed, and Naruto wondered how could he even cook without looking unless he had some kind of secret dojutsu. "Naruto, is good to see you," he said, happily to see him back, but most importantly that the village had been wrong about his supposed death. Naruto then went and explained that he had been training for 4 years. After a little while, Ayam handed Naruto a large bowl of hot ramen and told him to enjoy it, which he did for the moment that the hot noodles were in his mouth. Naruto had stars in his eyes as this was the best ramen, just like how he remembers it. Within seconds Naruto quickly ate everything in the bowl. "That was great, Ayam-chan," said Naruto, which made the girl smile. "Thanks, my Tusan taught me everything I know about cooking," she replied. "Is there any more?" asked Naruto as he was still hungry and was hoping to have more of Ayam's delicious ramen. "Sure, as much as you like," said Ayam with a smile and went to get more ramen from the large pot. Once he was full, Naruto thanked Ayam and Tenchi for the free meal and promised to return again soon. Both Ayam and Tenchi said he was more than welcome. Although Tenchi did joke that Naruto would have to pay next time, which caused Naruto to smirk a little. Walking towards his home, he thought, "Tomorrow is the academy, I wonder what it is like there. I hope my friends haven't forgotten me," thought Naruto. He knew the likes of Shikamaru probably didn't, but he wasn't sure when it came to Ino and Choji. Reaching his apartment, the clones had already cleaned the whole house. He smiled, and they soon popped out of existence. "Naruto, I'm thinking for you to start training with 2 tails worth of chakra after a year," Kurama suddenly said. "Once he reaches 2 tails, reaching 3 tails will be even more accessible. 4 tails would be much harder, probably the most challenging part." Naruto thought about it and nodded his head in agreement. Sitting on the couch, he started making a security seal for his house to stop any idiot trying to break in. Jiraiya. He was walking throughout the forest, in his pocket was a photo, he had kept it for 3 years now. He was always looking at it from time to time. Looking down at it, the picture was made in Mount Miyaboku, 1 year after Naruto had arrived. It was him in the photo and Naruto smiling, standing on his shoulders. Jiraiya smiled, looking at it. How much Naruto reminded him of Minato scared him sometimes. I'm sorry, but he couldn't make it. Jiraiya remembers those words extremely well. Sometimes even in nightmares. It has been 32 years now, and it still hurt whenever he remembered that tragedy. He quickly used his hand to wipe away a tear, putting the photo in his secret pocket. He continued his road. Chapter 25, Academy. Naruto. The cloak started singing in the morning. Naruto moaned in annoyance for waking up, but that wasn't enough. Wakey wakey Naruto, it's time to wake the fuck up, Kurama screamed in his head. Naruto's eyes immediately widened, and he stood up on his legs. He yawned loudly and started stretching his legs and arms. He looked at the table close to his bed, and the damn clock was still ringing like a broken record. Without thinking twice, he punched the clock. That was enough to destroy it along with the table holding it completely. He still wasn't used to his punches, but Jiraiya told him that he had the same problem that Tsunade-sama had when she first started using her insane strength. I didn't know that, you swear, Kurama. Naruto said mentally, not remembering that the furball had ever used swears. So what? I'm thousands of years old, and I'm old enough to swear, Kurama replied with a smirk. Fair enough, Naruto replied, smiling at his friend's response. Finally relaxing that the annoying sound was over, he looked at a chair where his clothes were lying on the back of the chair. He slowly walked up to it and grabbed his jacket. As he was wearing his jacket, his eyes went to the cloak his Tojiji had gifted him before reaching the village. The cloak was large for him right now, but was more for him to use once he became a genin. The cloak was dark with red flames at the bottom, with the Uzumaki symbol on the back, standing proudly. Naruto smiled and had thanked his Tojiji for thinking of him and giving him new clothes. And what the redhead liked even more was that the cloak looked exactly like his father except with a few minor changes, but still, Naruto treasured it like the sword his mother had given to him. Naruto then wore his dark pants. His scratches and injuries from his training had been healed. He took the seal paper and put it on his shoulder. With a hand sign, the seal disappeared and couldn't be seen. Tojiji had taught his jutsu to become invisible, but when Naruto had asked how and why he had made the jutsu, his godfather had just murmured something under his breath and told him that he didn't need to know. Naruto was sure that he needed it to spy in enemy villages for information, right? For what else could he be using it? His seal papers could only be seen with Sharingan or Byakugan. His seal was a chakra storage seal. He hid it from the naked eye since he didn't want people to know all his secrets. The seal also worked as a barrier seal to create a protecting barrier around him that used his chakra. Combining seals was one of the 3 most challenging parts of learning Fuinjutsu. Naruto developed both a storage seal and barrier seal and combined them in a single seal that could do both. That was what he needed to learn in level 7 of Fuinjutsu. Naruto naturally asked if someone could combine like 3 seals. Still, Tojiji told him that the only one who could do that was his father and mother, who could incorporate 3 different seals, but his sensei then said that he had never heard of combining more than 3 seals. Naruto was sure there was a way to do that as well, but right now, he wasn't at the level needed to start thinking about that. When it came to the seal on his stomach, he still had no clue why the seal would glow red. Kurama explained that when he had lost control, the seal had stopped him from going further, but the seal apparently worked in 2 ways. When Naruto had used 1 tael worth of chakra without losing control, the seal had not tried to stop it, almost like the seal was designed to know when Naruto had control and when not. That was a relief to Naruto since it meant he could try to go 2 taels without the fear that he might lose control, but Kurama had warned him that the seal had a limit. If he lost control and went 6 taels or above, then Kurama wasn't sure if the seal would be able to do anything. Naruto had asked what KCM, Kyubi chakra mode, that he had once mentioned to him was. Kurama had told him to use it. He needed the key for the seal and second to control all 9 taels worth of chakra and get rid of his negative side. Naruto didn't understand what that meant, but Kurama told him to not worry about it. The redhead then had asked about the Baryon mode, but Kurama had quickly dropped the subject and told him that wasn't needed for him to know. Naruto didn't care much, and he wanted to be strong on his own and not rely on Kurama all the time. Naruto prepared his food, rice with egg. He broke the egg at the top of his rice bowl and used a chopstick to mix them. He used a bit of melted chocolate. He kept moving his chopstick around until he thought that was good enough. He soon started eating and followed it with water. After eating, he walked to the door. He smirked, seeing the seals that he had put in the house in case someone wanted to do something funny, and he grabbed the letter that he was supposed to give to the teacher. He opened the door and wore his blue shinobi sandals. He jumped from the staircase and landed on the ground, and soon started walking towards the academy. Since he arrived yesterday, the word had spread in some parts of the village that the demon fox has returned from the dead and is ready to slaughter all of them. Naruto sighed, tired of the look some people were giving him. He knew these looked well, but not being here for 4 years and not receiving them for such a long time made him kind of forget how it was to have them. As he was walking, Naruto couldn't help but feel the negative emotions of many people around him. They glared at him, some saying that the demon had been reborn and that they should kill him again or some bullshit like that. Tired of this, Naruto jumped up to the rooftop and started walking towards the academy. He just hoped the academy would be worth it and that he wouldn't waste his time there. Kurama, what do you think I should do about the academy? Naruto suddenly asked. What do you mean? What is there to do except listen to a boring teacher who talks too fast and calls everyone who asks questions an idiot for not understanding? Kurama replied. Naruto chuckled slightly at his reply but decided to get to the point. I mean, we both know that if I do very well in the academy, the civil council will be so happy. To complain that you're taking over my body and ready to kill all of them, Naruto replied. Kurama laughed at his response. Why does it matter? They will bitch and moan even if you're the dead last. Don't try to do things their way to please a bunch of idiots who talk about things they don't understand, Kurama replied. Naruto mentally nodded his head in agreement with what Kurama said. He thought the same but just wanted to have a second thought about this subject. Naruto slowly reached the academy. Class. The students who wanted to become shinobi in the future, all were waiting for the arrival of their teacher to start their study. Many found the whole thing boring, and one found it troublesome. So far they had only been teaching simple boring history and have a few fights here and there among students. But so far, nothing special. They still hadn't learned any awesome jutsu. Most of them couldn't wait until they became genin and went on adventures to earn respect and glory. They all thought they would protect important people and fight and win against the bad guys. The door suddenly opened to reveal a pink-haired girl, who immediately screeched at the top of her lungs. Sasuke Kun walking up the stairs and sitting close to his place, since Sasuke always sat alone and didn't want anyone to sit close to his place. He was quiet and didn't talk much. Most would respond with HNN, but that was made him look cool to most of the girls in the class. Except for a certain girl, who didn't talk much because of her shyness. Her eyes were white like milk because of her clan's Kekii Genkai. The Byakugan. Followed by the pink girl soon came a blonde girl. Ino Yamanaka slowly shook her head at seeing Sakura scream like that. Ino walked and sat close to Sakura, who had stars in her eyes and looked at the brooding Uchiha like he was a prince in shining armor. Close to Shikamaru's desk was seated a boy wearing a high jacket covering most of his face, dark glasses that covered his eyes. Many thoughts of him as a freak, and some who knew about his clan jutsu with bugs found him disturbing. Close to him was seated a boy with red lines across his cheek, sharp teeth, and a dog at the top of his head. After a while, every student came to the class and was waiting for the teacher. The door suddenly opened to reveal a man around his 30s, a mark that went from cheek to cheek across his nose. Seeing that everyone had come, he cleared his throat to start. Today will be different. Right now, we will welcome the new student of our class. Now I. He was interrupted by the boy with the dog. Hey, what's this? How he can join us without doing the first 2 years? The boy almost shouted accusingly at the teacher. His dog barked in agreement with his owner. Kiba, the boy, has permission from the Hokage. If you have any problems, you can go and talk to him. The teacher responded with a higher tone. The mention of the Hokage made Kiba quiet and sat down without saying another word. Understanding there wouldn't be any more interruptions, he decided to continue. Now, I want everyone to be kind to him and treat him like a friend, he finished, but he wasn't sure about this part. He understood who the boy was. Unlike the others, he didn't straight up hate him, but still looking at him reminded him of his parents. Come in, the teacher shouted, and the door opened to reveal Naruto walking inside. His red hair like blood was what immediately caught the attention of everyone in the class. Ino silently gasped. She remembered the tomato, Naruto. Shikamaru was fully awake, much to Choji's surprise, who looked happy to see Naruto again. The three remembered him and had been sad when they had heard that he had gone outside the village to train. Naruto noticed the look of curiosity of many around the class. He suddenly heard a voice from his right side. Introduce yourself, the teacher Iruka said, but without looking at him. Naruto wondered if the teacher hated him. He couldn't feel any negative emotions, well, not to the same extent as the others, but he could feel a small hint of sorrow and anger inside him. Naruto then focused on the class in front of him. Hello there, he said with a carefree tone. The whole class sweat dropped at his choice of words. I meant your name, Iruka-sensei said with annoyance in his tone. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, I hope we have a good time, he introduced himself, not knowing what else to say. His hands behind his head. Now, would you kindly sit somewhere that you want, Iruka-sensei told him with a stern tone. His eyes immediately noticed Shikamaru sitting close with who he thought was Choji. To his surprise, the third chair of their desk was empty, and his eyes looked to his right to see Ino sitting close to a pink-haired girl. She looked different, taller, and her hair was tightened to a short ponytail. She was wearing a purple shirt. Naruto turned to look at the pineapple boy and decided to sit close to Shikamaru since he knew them, but he didn't know if they still remembered him. He walked up to them and turned to look at Shikamaru. Can I sit here? He asked, looking at them. Of course, Naruto has been a long time, Choji replied immediately, happy that their friend was back in the village. Naruto's face brightened that Choji could remember him. Sitting down, Shikamaru was in the middle, and Choji was on the left side. Shikamaru, how have you been? Naruto asked, looking at Shikamaru whose head was resting against the desk, his hands like a pillow. Troublesome is good to see you again, Naruto, he greeted him with a tired tone before returning to sleep. Both Choji and Naruto had a sweet drop behind their heads. He hasn't changed at all, the same lazy, I wonder if his dream is still to sleep? Naruto asked himself, happy that he could spend time with them. Iruka cleared his throat to grab everyone's attention except Shikamaru. Everyone turned to him, and Naruto wondered what they would learn first with enthusiasm. Later. This is boring, Naruto said to himself. He couldn't believe for 3 hours that he had been here, the only thing they did was to talk about history. He couldn't understand why. Naruto knew knowing history was important, but knowing clans, bloodlines, and how to start elemental manipulation training was far more critical, for crying out loud. Or maybe learn your affinities. Hell, he asked Choji, since Shikamaru had fallen asleep, if they were taught how to do chakra control exercise, and the answer was no. Naruto couldn't understand. Why? Learning walking in trees and standing on the water was not something that needed that much thought and training and was nothing that couldn't be taught to 8-year-old children. Right now, Naruto had fallen asleep, his hands like a pillow. Shikamaru was sleeping, leaving Choji to look at them with a raised eyebrow. He didn't expect Naruto to end up like Shikamaru. Iruka was getting irritated by their laziness. He understood Shikamaru, but why Naruto? He needed to know these things. Naruto! Iruka screamed to grab the redhead's attention. Naruto slowly raised his head and rubbed his eyes with his hand. You say something, Iruka-sensei? Naruto asked with a tired tone and with half-closed eyes. Iruka was boiling inside and letting out steam from his ears. I'm going to ask you questions. Let's see if you can answer them, he stated. Naruto just shrugged his shoulders, ready to answer whatever he might throw at him. Well, for what was the first Hokage known for? Iruka asked. He was known for his wit style that is the strongest bloodline ever to exist, even stronger than the Sharingan. At the mention that Mokuton was stronger than Sharingan, Sasuke clenched his teeth and fists. Naruto noticed his sudden change of emotions but didn't bother to see what was his problem. Mokuton could be used to control the tailed beasts including Kyuubi. The first Hokage along with Madara Uchiha were the ones to build the hidden village in the leaf. The village was built with the Mokuton ability of the first Hokage. Naruto finished. Iruka was impressed since he didn't expect Naruto to know the answer and he knew more than needed. After almost half an hour later, Iruka looked surprised, and so was everyone in the class. Even Shikamaru was slightly self-aware of what was happening in the class. Naruto had answered every question that Iruka-sensei threw at him, hell, even questions that the class hadn't learned yet. Iruka made a mental note not to underestimate Naruto and be honest, and he was impressed with what the kid knew. Well, now Mizuki will come here, and you will have an honor duel against each other, Iruka stated, and that grabbed the attention of everyone in the class. Even Shikamaru was fully awake now. Naruto wondered how good his friends were and if anyone around here was at his level, but he could feel that none of them had even high Genin chakra. But Naruto knew better than to underestimate them. Suddenly the door opened, revealing a man close to Iruka's age. White hair and a fake smile on his face. His face looked like a triangle to Naruto. His eyes turned to the class when he almost immediately noticed the redhead with whiskers on the front. He fought the urge to clench his teeth. So the rumors are true. The demon has returned, Mizuka thought with a creepy smile. Naruto could feel the negative emotions from the new guy, and he fought the urge to roll his eyes. He wondered if the teacher would try to do anything against him, but Naruto knew it didn't matter in the end. The man Mizuka had low Chunin chakra level. They soon started leaving the class and going outside. Naruto noticed the brooding Uchiha was looking at him with a hint of irritation and curiosity. Naruto knew from Jiraiya-sensei that the Uchiha clan had been massacred from Itachi Uchiha. He felt pity for him and understood how it is to lose your clan. They soon were outside. Irika-sensei turned his head to the class. First, we will practice throwing shurikens, he stated with a stern voice. Each of the students took turns at the target poles and the target dummies for the next hour. Shino hit 7 out of the 10 targets points on the target pole and got 3 out of 5 target points on the first target dummy, 4 out of 5 on the second dummy, and 4 out of 5 again on the third. Kiba hit 5 out of the 10 target points on the target pole and got 3 out of 5 target points on the first target dummy, 2 out of 5 on the second dummy, and 4 on the third. Hinata hit 7 out of the 10 target points on the target pole and got 4 out of 5 target points on the first target dummy, 3 out of 5 on the second dummy, and 4 again on the third. Sakura hit 1 out of the 10 target points, earning a look of disappointment from Irika. Ino hit 3 out of the 10. She looked proud with herself that she got 3, and most importantly, she hit more than Sakura, who had a tick mark on her forehead. Finally, the last students remaining were Sasuke and Naruto. Sasuke got all the target's points on the target pole at once, where he threw all 10 of his shurikens at once, where they all hit the target's points on the target pole dead center at roughly the same time. Upon seeing this, Sasuke's fangirls started to scream and cheer loudly at how their Sasuke-kun was so fabulous and talented and that he was the best. Sasuke, for his part, ignored the girls' screaming, while Naruto cringed at the screams, after which he shook his head in annoyance, as his mother warned him in her letter about the fangirl and to stay away from them. He could also not help but be disappointed that all the girls in the class, minus Hinata, were fangirls, which went to show how far the Konoha Academy standards had fallen. He had thought that the girls in a shinobi village as big as Konoha would train like Fu or Asha, but instead, he found the opposite. The Hidden Leaf Village is known as the strongest village out of 5 big shinobi villages, but to see this kind of behavior made Naruto seriously question it. The next generation should be stronger than the last. Naruto then turned to watch Sasuke as he then threw some more shurikens at the target dummies, where he hit 4 out of 5 target points on all 3 target dummies. This, of course, resulted in more screams of joy from Sasuke's fangirls, much to Naruto's annoyance. After Sasuke was finished with a slight smirk on his face, Naruto knew he didn't care to have the attention of useless fangirls, but to see himself being better than the others made him smirk. Thinking he was on top, Irika then called Naruto up. Irika handed him the shurikens. Naruto sighed and looked at the targets. Many of the class were interested to see how the new guy does. Even Sasuke was slightly interested in seeing if he would be a loser or a challenge to compare himself with. Taking a deep breath, Naruto threw all his shurikens with a single throw, and all of them landed, making a perfect score, even better than Sasuke. All the girls gasped at what they saw, especially Ino, who couldn't help but notice that Naruto was better than Sasuke-kun. Shikamaru had a slight smirk, almost like he already knew the outcome. Choji had stopped eating. Kiba clenched his teeth, and it wasn't enough that Sasuke was better than him and stole all the attention, but now there's a second one. Sasuke looked interested in what he saw. So he's strong. Perhaps this Naruto wouldn't be a waste of time and could be an excellent rival to match myself with, Sasuke thought. Irika had his mouth wide open while Mizuki looked ready to burst into flames. Getting over the shock, Irika cleared his throat. Excellent throw, Naruto, you have a perfect score, 10 points. Sasuke is second place with 9 points. Irika went on saying how many points each one had. Soon after the throwing and aiming train, Irika began the taijutsu training, where he started to call out people in pairs and had them fight each other in taijutsu to see how well their taijutsu skills were. For the next 40 minutes, the students fought each other in taijutsu, where some won and others lost. Naruto watched their fights, but most weren't really worth watching, but even still, there were a small few that were. Some like Hinata's fight against Sakura, where Sakura attacked Hinata with her knowledge of basic academy-level taijutsu and was easily defeated by Hinata, who used a gentle fist. Hitting the ground, Sakura looked up at Hinata. "Hey, what's your problem?" she asked since she had apparently messed her hair when she hit the ground. Hinata just raised an eyebrow since this was a fight where they're supposed to fight. Irika shook his head and called the next match. Another was Choji against a student named Taha, where he used his size and power to defeat Taha. Naruto cheered for him, and so did Shikamaru. The final one that was of noteworthy attention was Sasuke against another academy student named Sando. Sasuke used his more advanced taijutsu skill and training to overwhelm Sando completely and defeat him without too much trouble. Finally came to Naruto's turn and his enemy was Kiba. When he saw who he was fighting, he grinned, and a cocky smile was on his face looking at the redhead like a tomato in front of him that didn't look much. Now let's see how well you do against an alpha like me, tomato. Kiba taunted him and pointed his finger at him. Naruto just raised an eyebrow. Did you say something? He asked. That made Kiba's blood boil that a nobody like him was acting like he was superior to him. Akamaru started barking at him, warning him that Naruto was stronger than even the teacher. Akamaru could feel a bit of the demonic chakra in Naruto, which made his tail go between his legs and started whining. Kiba looked at him confused but then turned at Naruto. Irika could only sigh at Kiba's behavior. Hajime, he shouted, and Kiba rushed at him with all his speed. His arms spread out, ready to hit his face with his fist. Naruto suddenly disappeared from the view and was in front of Kiba, caught him off guard. With a quick strike on his stomach, Kiba felt all his insides wanting to come out. He gasped and fell on his knees and threw out everything. "Oh! Howdy," he tried to ask. "How did I do it?" "Well, you rushed at me completely open, and you practically screamed at me, attacked me, and I did that," Naruto explained, looking down at him with a small smile. Kiba clenched his teeth before losing concussions. Akamaru rushed at his owner and started licking his face. Everyone looked surprised from what they saw, even Shikamaru looked surprised. He knew Naruto was stronger, but this just proved that he was beyond stronger. He sighed. "This is troublesome," he whispered to himself, but Choji heard him. "Did you see that? Of course, he's amazing. No, just amazing, he's handsome as sin." The girls started talking to each other about how Naruto looked. He sighed, annoyed, and walked back at the crowd. Mizuki clenched his fists tightly. "The demon is strong, the council will know about this demon, and this time we will kill you," he thought, furious that the demon brat was so strong. Irika looked impressed, but when he checked Kiba, he could see he wasn't hurt. He knew Naruto could have hurt him but didn't. That moment Irika smiled at the kid and decided to see him as more than just the demon fox of the Hidden Leaf Village. Chapter 26, A Symbol of Phoenix. Naruto. He slowly made his way towards his home, not that it really mattered. No one was waiting for him there, just an empty house full of loneliness. The first day was eventful. After the training, many girls had started looking at him with literal stars in their eyes. Looking at him like he was a good piece of meat or something. That annoyed Naruto since he knew that none of them was taking the academy seriously, probably thinking that being a shinobi means you will be famous or that it is easy to be one. Naruto didn't like that kind of girl. He was only 8 years old, but he wanted a girl that if she was a kunoichi, was a strong one and took the job seriously. It had her dreams for the future and didn't let anyone control her, a girl that had ambitions for the future. Funny and maybe a bit hot-headed. Naruto shook his head and noticed the gaze of many villagers around. He wondered how long it would take for them to try and attack him again. Naruto still remembered that night well, and he would never let them harm him again. During the academy, he had talked with Ino, who looked happy to see him again, but Naruto could see and literally feel her need to look behind. Naruto had glanced and noticed that she wanted to see the emo Uchiha sitting alone at his desk that was ignoring every living being around him. Naruto saw the emo and decided to see if he wanted to be a friend with him. After the hour was done, some students walked outside. The girls mostly depended on whether the cool Sasuke was staying or leaving the class. Naruto ignored them and stood in front of his desk. The Uchiha noticed the redhead and turned his eyes at him. "Do you want to come to sit with us?" Naruto suggested and pointed at where Shikamaru and Choji were sitting. Sasuke grunted and gave him a glare that Naruto had just brushed off. "I don't need to spend time with you losers," he replied with a cocky tone. Shikamaru and Choji didn't care about his words since they knew that Sasuke didn't care for anyone. They told the same to Naruto when he suggested asking the emo if he wanted to sit with them. Suddenly the air around Sasuke felt cold like ice. Even he felt a shiver through his whole body. Every fiber of his being was telling him that he had fucked it up. Naruto slammed his hand on the desk that broke the desk like it was made of nothing but paper. "Listen to me, you emo. I don't care what you say to me, but next time you talk like that, I will make sure that you know what it means to know pain," Naruto said with a promise. His voice was cold as winter, his whole body leaking ki enough to freeze Sasuke where he stood. Everyone was silent around the class. Kiba felt a cold sweat on his forehead. Shino's bugs could feel the massive amount of chakra in Naruto, but what frightened them was the demonic chakra. The fangirls of Sasuke wanted to yell at Naruto and protect their precious Sasuke-kun, but all the words had died on their throats. Ino, on the other hand, looked impressed by his amount of strength. Naruto turned around and walked back to his desk as if nothing had happened. Naruto didn't feel sorry for saying that to the emo. If there was one thing he hated, it was the cocky bastards like him who see everyone else beneath him. After that, Naruto got to know Shino, who actually talked smartly, and Hinata. She looked decent enough and didn't look like a fangirl, but she turned as red as his hair when he tried to talk to her. After that, Naruto walked back to his desk and spoke with Shikamaru and Choji. Naruto wondered when Tojichi would return. He hoped soon. But at the same time, he wanted to surprise him. Naruto was working on a seal he hoped to impress him but would take a few months to complete it. As he kept walking, he could feel the ANBU staying close, but one of them had a chakra that he recognized. He stooped, walked and turned his head up and looked at the ANBU at the top of the building. "I know you're there," he shouted, making a few citizens around confused. An ANBU with a dog mask suddenly appeared in front of him. Naruto recognized his white hair, and who could forget the mask under his ANBU mask. Kakashi removed his ANBU mask and greeted his student when Naruto pointed the finger at him, smiling. "You're the old man," he shouted excitedly. Kakashi lowered his head in despair. Clouds formed on top of him and started raining only at him, while his ANBU friend was busy lying on the floor and laughing her ass off. "Old man Kakashi, can't wait to tell the others," she yelled, still laughing. Kakashi only lowered his head even more. Naruto looked at him, not sure what to do. While Kakashi was murmuring something about a guy named Guy? Naruto wasn't sure what he meant but decided to cheer him up. "I was only joking, Kakashi-sensei. It's good to see you again," Naruto quickly said. Kakashi slowly stood, and I smiled at him. "Just joking around, Naruto," he replied, smiling and turning to look at Naruto more closely. He had to admit that Naruto had grown quite a bit, and he couldn't help but notice the sword behind his back. That confused him slightly since he was sure that he didn't have the blade at the academy. "I see you have grown up, Naruto. It's good to see my student again," he said with another eye smile. Naruto smiled back but noticed the orange book on his porch. He was sure that it was Jiraiya-sensei's book from the color alone. Naruto remembered the first book that he gave him. It had a fantastic story, and apparently, his father had loved his first book, and he wondered what this one had a story like that. "Kakashi-sensei, can I borrow your book?" Naruto asked innocently and pointed at his book. At that moment, Kakashi felt like he would burn in hell. He could feel the ki of his ANBU friend, and she despised his books and had tried many times to slice them with her katana. He put a hand behind his head and took a step back. "Ha! Ha 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 ho! Why do you want it?" Kakashi asked, sweating, and his whole body was sweating. He hoped that Naruto was just curious. "Jiraiya-sensei writes that book. I have seen him write it but never read it. Can I borrow it since the shops won't sell it to me?" he said, smiling innocently at him. Kakashi felt all his blood leave his whole body, and his entire face turned pale like snow. But, fortunately, his friend landed beside him and smiled at Naruto. "That book is not for you, Naruto-kun. How about you go to Ichiraka Ramen?" she suggested with a soft tone. Naruto turned his attention to her and noticed her katana. He wondered how good was she since she was an ANBU but decided not to bother her since probably she had already her hands full with her job as an ANBU. He nodded his head and decided to leave. "Alright, I hope to meet Kakashi-sensei and ANBU-sama again," he said and bowed his head respectfully and soon left by jumping from roof to roof. Seeing him leave, Kakashi let out a sigh of relief. But then he turned his head slowly at his friend. "If you even dare to think Tio hurt his innocence, I will burn all your books in front of you," she promised with a tone that sent shivers of fear in his body. He quickly raised his hands, trying to defend himself. "There's no need. He's still too young for them," he replied and talked a few steps back, and decided to immediately leave and go after Naruto to see if anyone would bother him. Sarutobi. Paperwork after paperwork after paperwork after another pile of paperwork. He was getting tired of this evil spawn. He just wanted to have some time to read his favorite book and relax. Was that too much to ask? Apparently, it was when he saw the door opening and inside walked his former teammates, Hamura, Koharu and Danzo. He stopped his war with paperwork and prepared for his upcoming war. He thought that maybe that the actual shinobi war was easier than dealing with paperwork and his teammates. Why weren't we informed that the Jinchuriki has returned? Danzo asked, looking down at the old Hokage. Sarutobi sighed and stood up. His form showed power despite his age. Danzo noticed it and took a step back, and so did Hamura and Koharu. Mostly to avoid this exact same conversation, but yes, Naruto has returned and has joined the academy, he replied, grabbing his pipe from the desk and smoking. Danzo narrowed his eyes, and Hamura took a step forward. We have called for a meeting tomorrow morning, the council needs to know, she informed him and turned to leave. Sarutobi felt another headache coming. Oh no, we all know there's no reason to call for a meeting, he replied, hoping that Naruto being here would stay hidden for a while longer. Danzo smirked. Too late, Sarutobi, the village needs to know. He stated, and they left the office, leaving him alone with his headache. Tomorrow. The council had gathered early in the morning, it was 9 a.m., and everyone had arrived except the Hokage. The clan heads were there despite seeing this meeting as pointless. The civil part of the council discussed with each other since not all of them knew what was happening. The door suddenly opened to reveal Sarutobi walking inside, his face dead serious and showing authority. Everyone stood up until he sat in his chair, followed by everyone else. The Hokage was about to start this time-wasting meeting when a civil decided to speak up. What is that I heard that the demon has returned? I thought we killed the demon, he shouted, demanding answers when he felt everything became cold. Sarutobi had enough of this. Civil Ogura, do you need to be reminded that I'm the Hokage here, not you? He spoke with a tone that frightened everyone in the council. Even Danzo felt a shiver on his body. The civil sat down and kept quiet. Hiruzen turned to look at his teammates. Why did you call this meeting for? He demanded. The others were focused since they wanted to know why this meeting was called so early. Danzo cleared his throat, grabbing everyone's attention. This council is gathered to announce that Uzumaki Naruto has returned to the village and has joined the academy, he said out loud for everyone to hear. Shikaku smiled hearing this. Of course, Shikamaru had told him yesterday after arriving from the academy that Naruto-kun had returned. He wondered how training for 4 years with Jiraiya-sama had shaped the boy. Inoichi was happy to hear that since Ino had informed him last night about his return. Even Chozo was delighted for it despite not being sure at the beginning that it would be safe to have kids around him. Hayashi Hyuga kept an emotionless face but was slightly happy to hear about the son of Minato. Some Minazuka smirked from ear to ear. She always hated the civil council for celebrating the death of a kid. It didn't take long, and the civil council was in an uproar, and one of them stood up with his hands slammed in the table. I thought we killed that demon. Everyone saw his head rolling in the ground like a rock. The blood flew everywhere, and everyone in the civil council was shocked, and Sarutobi released his ki at maximum. That made all of them see visions of the same death. Even the clan heads were having a hard time to breath. Sarutobi stopped his ki, and silence took over the room. It felt like no one was there. The cloak could be heard ticking, even the bugs around Shibi Aburame's face were making sound enough to be heard around the room. After a few minutes without anyone talking, Sarutobi took a deep breath in his pipe. Before you have any thoughts, Jiraiya himself had warned me not to hurt Naruto, Sarutobi warned and looked around the council to see if anyone wanted to speak again. This meeting has ended, he announced and stood up and left the room. Danzo clenched his teeth and hands and looked at Sarutobi as he was leaving. You think you won this round, Sarutobi, but even the demon brat can't do anything against my weapons. Once he's mine, I will have everything left by the 4th Hokage, and the Kyuubi will be mine, he thought and left the council ready to talk with his loyal weapons. Ashera. She had been training in her kenjutsu for hours now. She moved her sword like she was dancing in water, her long red hair flying with the wind, shining from the light of the sun high in the sky. She grabbed her sword tightly before swinging at the tree in front of her. The swing was strong enough to slice 5 trees, she saw them falling in the ground. Their leaves fell all around her. She took a deep breath and looked at her work. Her kenjutsu had advanced since Naruto had left, but she had slacked off a little in her fuinjutsu. She was still in level V, but Asha wasn't in any hurry. Right now, she wanted to perfect her kenjutsu and her elemental manipulation. She had left a clone to train in elemental manipulation. Since she had only 2 and had high water affinity, she first had started to work in water manipulation. She needed less time than Naruto, who had 4 of them, or Fu, who had 3. Thinking about the redhead, she felt sad. Just the thought of him saddened her. He's my family. she thought with a smile on her face. The same was for Fu. Asha couldn't wait to meet him again and wondered how would he look like when he grew up, she thought, her fingers playing with her hair. With a slight blush on her face, she closed her eyes and put the sword back to its scabbard. Her mind went to the Phoenix contract. Naruto had told her about it, and she wondered if she could find it anywhere. But one thing she remembered from Jiraiya-sama. He had told them the story of how he had ended up with the Toad contract. Apparently, he had tried to do the summoning jutsu without having a contract, but instead, he ended up in Mount Mayaboku. She put the finger on her chin and decided that it was worth a try. She quickly used her small kunai to cut her index finger, made all the necessary hand signs, and slammed her hand on the ground, but nothing happened. She raised her eyebrow and waited a few minutes, but nothing happened. She shrugged her shoulders and decided to go with her day. The day slowly ended. Ashera was lying in her bed, in Fu's house. Her friend slept in another bed next to hers. Fu had spent the whole day training her wind manipulation. Ashera slowly closed her eyes to sleep. She opened her eyes to see herself falling, her body spread and falling in the ground below. She was higher than she had ever been before. It seemed as though she had been falling for years. Fly, a voice whispered in the darkness, but Ashera did not know how to fly, so all she could do was fall. The ground was so far below her she could barely make it out through the gray mists that whirled around her, but she could feel how fast she was falling, and she knew what was waiting for her down there. Even in dreams, you could not fall forever. She would wake up in the instant before she hit the ground, she knew. You always woke up in the instant before you hit the ground. And if you don't? The voice asked. The ground was closer now, still far, far away, 1,000 miles away, but closer than it had been. It was cold here in the darkness. There was no sun, no stars, only the ground below coming up to smash her, and the gray mists, and the whispering voice. She wanted to cry. Not cry. Fly. I can't fly, Ashera said. I can't. I can't. How do you know? Have you ever tried? The voice was high and thin. Asha looked around to see where it was coming from. A red bird was spiraling down with her, just out of reach, following her as she fell. She had a long red tail behind her, and her wings looked to be made of red flames. Help me, she said. I'm trying, the bird replied. Are you really a bird? Ashera asked. Are you really falling? The bird asked back. It's just a dream, Ashera said. Is it? Asked the bird. I'll wake up when I hit the ground, Ashera told the bird. You'll die when you hit the ground, the bird said. It went back to looking at the ground below. Ashera looked down. She could see mountains now, their peaks white with snow, and the silver thread of rivers in dark woods. She closed her eyes and began to cry. That won't do any good, the bird said. I told you, the answer is flying, not crying. How hard can it be? I'm doing it. The bird took to the air and flapped around Ashera's hand. You have wings, Asha pointed out. Maybe you do too. Asha felt along her shoulders, groping for feathers. There are different kinds of wings, the bird said. Ashera was staring at her arms, her legs. She was so skinny, just skin stretched taut over bones. Had she always been so thin? She tried to remember. A face swam up at her out of the gray mist, shining with light and darkness. You said you wouldn't let any of your friends die. Look around you, it said. Ashera screamed. The bird took to the air, cawing. Not that, it shrieked at her. Forget that, you do not need it now, put it aside, put it away. It landed on Ashera's shoulder and pecked at her, and the shining dark face was gone. Ashera was falling faster than ever. The gray mists howled around her as she plunged toward the earth below. What are you doing to me? She asked the bird, tearful. I am teaching you how to fly. I can't fly. You're flying right now. I'm falling. Every flight begins with a fall, the bird said. Look down. I'm afraid. Look down. Asha looked down and felt her insides turn to water. The ground was rushing up at her now. The whole world was spread out below her, a tapestry of white and brown and green. She could see everything so clearly that for a moment, she forgot to be afraid. She could see the whole world and everyone in it. She saw the hidden leaf as the eagles see it, the tall towers looking squat and stubby from above, the walls just lines in the dirt. The faces of the old Hokage are carved in the mountain. She saw Naruto in an empty field alone, surrounded by hatred and despair. She wanted to cry when she saw her friend alone. She saw a giant shadow slowly rising behind Naruto. The shadow had strange purple eyes with dark rings. The shadow gradually thinned, the strange purple eyes smashed together and became one single eye, but instead, there were 3 tomos in each circle. The shadow looked different, and 10 tails slowly spread behind him. Asha saw Naruto slowly turning to look at her, but one eye was blue, but the white part of the eye had changed to dark like a void, and the other eye still looked normal. His face was half dead and half alive. His kind eye was crying tears of happiness, the other crying frozen tears of despair. It felt Ashera watching. It lifted its eyes from the still waters and stared back at her knowingly. She looked east and saw mountains kissing the sky, reaching beyond anyone had ever reached before. At the top of the highest mountain, a girl crying tears of lies and love. She looked at the village hidden in the mist, a boy sitting alone in the room, his eyes crying the pain inside his heart. But his shadow was that of a man with a Sharingan, a smile on the shadow man's face. She looked around and saw a boy holding in his shoulders the pain of loss of loved ones, the hatred of a lie, and the love of a girl that loved him until the end. His Sharingan shone like fire in the darkness. She lifted her eyes and saw clear. A magnificent village now in ruins, once was what known for peace and understanding, now left in nothing but ash and death. Now you know, the bird whispered as it sat on her shoulder. Now you know why you must live. Why? Ashera said, not understanding, falling. Asha looked at the bird on her shoulder, and the bird looked back. It had 2 eyes, one red full of blood and the other dark full of darkness. Asha looked down. There was nothing below her now but snow and cold and death. Now, Ashera, the crow urged. Choose. Fly or die. Death reached for her, screaming. Ashera spread his arms and flew. Wings unseen drank the wind and filled and pulled her upward. The terrible needles of ice receded below her. The sky opened up above. Asha soared. It was better than training. It was better than anything. The world grew small beneath her. I'm flying! She cried out in delight. The bird landed on her shoulder, and his eyes looked at her before poking her forehead. She felt pain and fire in her forehead. Fly like fire, raise from the ashes. The bird whispered, find me, find us in the place where the sun never shines. Where the forgotten rest. The bird said before his whole body engulfed in red flames. His wings, his legs, his chest, his head, and his eyes. Everything became fire before taking the sky and went to her forehead like a burning arrow. Ashera screamed in pain, the burning feeling spread all over her body, her forehead felt like it would split. Her body became fire, red lines spreading all over her body. Her legs, her arms, her chest, and her head. The flames slowly disappeared, and the lines slowly retreated back. The fire in her forehead died down, and left was an empty red circle with a slighter darker circle inside. Ashera felt her body go limp, her eyes closing on her own. That night Ashera kept sleeping, but her forehead slowly started shining in the darkness of the night. A small red circle slowly appeared on her forehead, and a smaller, darker one inside the first circle. The light died down, but the ring stood there. Chapter 27, Memories. Jiraiya. The silence of the forest around was relaxing, but Jiraiya of the Sannin had to meet someone. He dropped his pen and stood up on his feet. His face, usually funny and joking, now was serious and made him look like a real shinobi. He closed his eyes for a second before opening them again. In front of him now stood a man wearing black cloak with red clouds. His hair had grown a bit, but his Sharingan could clearly be seen. His face looked emotionless to anyone, but Jiraiya could see right through his mask. Sometimes he still wondered how he could even stay sane after what he was forced to do. When Sarutobi-sensei had informed him of the real reason why the Uchiha clan was massacred, Jiraiya didn't believe it. They would be so foolish. Even if somehow, by some miracle, they would take over the village, both sides would take heavy losses. In that point would be like inviting Kumo or Iwa to conquer the Hidden Leaf village. Jiraiya clenched his fist and had a fighting position if something happened out of the ordinary. Jiraiya-sama, is good to meet you again, but I don't have time to stay, Itachi said respectfully before throwing a scroll at Jiraiya. He grabbed it and quickly sealed it away. Something else? Jiraiya asked with a serious tone, his tone firm. The leader has the Rinnegan, Itachi informed him, and Jiraiya took a step back. His eyes widened, his face filled with different thoughts. and he didn't know what to think. His location? Jiraiya asked quickly, wondering where this leader stayed. If Itachi knew, perhaps Jiraiya could pay him a little visit and see for himself if this one was his old student or someone who had stolen his eyes. Itachi shook his head in denial, much to Jiraiya's disappointment. But he quickly got over it and told him to leave before they understood that he had left. Itachi quickly turned into crows and flew away. Jiraiya just stood there, not knowing what to think of all this. Nagato, is that really you? But why? He had many questions and no answers to any of them. He had always regretted not taking his students with him to the Hidden Leaf Village. They would be safer there. Jiraiya knew Nagato's Rinnegan would be hard to hide, especially from people like Danzo or Orochimaru, who would kill to have it. But still, perhaps they would be safer there than in Rain Village. Jiraiya thought perhaps his students were still in Hidden Rain Village, but that possibly was slim. The Hidden Rain Village was still under Hanzo the Salamander, and he was an excellent shinobi that managed to wipe the floor with all 3 Sannin when they were at their peak. He knew he could walk in and possibly search if they were there, but if he weren't there, he would waste his time and possibly risk his life. Jiraiya knew he didn't have time to search around for him, and he still needed to keep an eye on Orochimaru and the villages around Hidden Leaf. Iwa hated the village with a burning passion right now, but they still were recovering from their huge losses against Minato. Jiraiya had received letters saying that apparently the older man Anoki didn't really crave for vengeance, or maybe he had gotten soft. When it came to Kumo, their attempt to kidnap Hinata Hyuga had spread around, and that put them in a wrong spot. Many lands that usually hired Kumo shinobis had either started hiring shinobi or different villages or not hiring at all. Not every land liked to hire shinobi from a village that would go so low that they would try to do something like that. Acts like that were looked at as horrific, and many people didn't want to have any connection with that kind of shinobis. The lands around Kumo, of course, would continue hiring them, but the lands outside the Lighting Land were having second guesses. Then his mind went to Kiri. The village was in a civil war. The kind and gentle Mizukage had suddenly ordered all the people with a bloodline to be executed with no exceptions. He wondered why the sudden change towards his people. Jiraiya didn't need to be a genius to conclude that he was under a genjutsu, but the thought that someone could control a Mizukage and not mention the said Mizukage was a Jinchuriki. His mind then went to Nagato. He sighed in annoyance and a hint of sadness, and he didn't know which could be worse. Someone had stolen Nagato's Rinnegan for himself, or Nagato himself was the leader of the Akatsuki. Jiraiya wasn't sure which one was worse. Jiraiya looked down at the scroll Itachi gave him. He opened it and read the information provided to him. I don't know the identity of the leader. I have seen him only twice and only see him through a jutsu that made him look like a shadow. I can't tell how he looks except his Rinnegan. My partner is Kisame Hoshigaki. His strongest weapon is his sword, Samahata, that can absorb the chakra of the enemy. Kisame mentioned that he could absorb Bija chakra too. I'm not sure about Sage chakra. Jiraiya put the finger on his chin. The sword looked quite helpful, but he doubted that he could absorb Sage chakra. It would take lots of training and time to use Sage chakra without turning to stone. Hell, Jiraiya himself couldn't use it without the help of Ma and Pa. I haven't seen anyone else from the organization except I know Orochimaru is in the Akatsuki. I can't send information for a long time. We will move to test Jinchuriki after 5 years and start capturing them after 8 years. Jiraiya finished the letter and set it on fire, and he wondered if Naruto would be strong enough to fight them when they came after him. He hoped that he would be. When it came to how strong he was, Jiraiya knew Naruto was strong. Hell, if he used one-tailed chakra cloak and without weights, he was sure that Naruto would be strong. Maybe medium Jonin level, but he doubted it. And Orochimaru in the Akatsuki? Jiraiya never thought his former teammate would ever accept to be part of a group, but he was sure he was there to try and steal the Rinnegan or possibly the Sharingan of Itachi. Jiraiya then thought about Tsunade. He got information that he was in the land of tea. He put his things back in his bag and returned to his journey to find Tsunade. 3 weeks later. The village in front of him wasn't a big one but was an excellent place to stay, and not that many bandits around. Land of Tea always hired shinobi of Hidden Leaf Village to protect them whenever they needed help. Jiraiya reached a tea restaurant and walked inside. He looked around and saw his friend, and sat close to him, not giving him any eye contact. The man making the tea was an older man who looked kind. "What tea can I give you?" he asked kindly. Jiraiya glanced at his eyes and could tell this was a veteran probably. "I want a cup of leaf tea," Jiraiya ordered, and the old man nodded his head before walking away and started preparing the tea. That friend close to him passed him a blank letter before getting up and leaving the tea restaurant. He left a few coins to pay for his tea on the table. Jiraiya quickly sealed the letter on his seal under his sleeve. The older man returned and gave him the cup of tea. Jiraiya took a sip and couldn't help but notice that was probably the best tea he had ever tested. Delicious tea, I'm sure you have a lot of work, Jiraiya praised him. The older man smiled and was a genuine smile. Thank you, is not every day that I have a man like you come to my restaurant. A cup of tea is an extraordinary thing, the old man said kindly as he poured him another cup of tea. I see you have struggled with yourself, he said, sitting on the other side of the table. Jiraiya raised his eyebrows and wondered how he knew. Just ghosts of my past, Jiraiya replied, drinking tea again. I know how it's like to be tormented by the past. My son died young, before his time. And me, I'm old and still standing. One thing I know about failures is that they're opportunities to start again, but wiser, he said and walked away. Jiraiya thought about what he said and wondered if he was doing what was right. He wasn't there when Minato needed him most, but now Naruto. Jiraiya thought of him, he thought of his smile, his eyes determined, full of love and determination. Like a true Kage should be. I'm going to rebuild my home, I'm going to build a village that no one would ever be harmed or looked down on. A village that anyone can call home. Jiraiya remembered Naruto's word, closing his eyes, he remembered Minato. You're my teacher, and I know no one better to be the godfather of my son. Jiraiya smiled and stood on his legs. He left twice the coins needed for payment and walked to the door. He soon left and decided to see his teammate. It had been a long time since he had last seen her. Later, he saw a casino close to him. He knew she must be there. He had already checked every restaurant that sells sake, but she wasn't in any of them. His hands went to his pocket and looked at the photo he had with Naruto. He smiled and took all his courage to walk inside. His eyes soon saw a blonde woman playing in a machine. Close to her stood a woman with dark hair who looked concerned and holding a pig in her hands. Jiraiya slowly reached her and decided to let her know of his presence. You know, some things change, but some never change, Tsunade, he said with a slight smirk on his face. Tsunade stopped playing and turned her head to look at Jiraiya. The woman close to her, who Jiraiya knew was Shizune, looked surprised and slightly nervous. What are you doing here, Jiraiya? Can't you see I'm trying to win? Tsunade shouted, annoyed but slightly happy to see her teammate, but he didn't need to know the last part. Jiraiya laughed at her response. Oh please, the day you win is not a day I'm looking forward to, he replied, since he knew her luck in gambling was known everywhere. That's why some had called her the legendary sucker. But I'm here to offer you a drink, he said, smiling. Tsunade raised her eyebrow but then just shrugged her shoulders and decided to follow him behind. A free sake was an opportunity she wouldn't let slip. Reaching a restaurant, they sat, and Tsunade immediately ordered sake. Shizune just ordered a glass with water, and Jiraiya ordered the same. The orders arrived, and Tsunade drank a glass with one go, filled another one, and turned her head at Jiraiya. So why are you here, Jiraiya? If you want me to return to the village, my answer is no, she said determinedly. Jiraiya sighed sadly, looking at the woman, how she was before. He shook his head and just decided to be blunt. No, I'm here to ask why you aren't keeping your promise to Kushina, he said harshly, and gone was the humorous tone. The mention of Kushina's name made Tsunade break the glass, and her whole body filled with sadness and then with rage. She looked at her teammate with fury. Shizune noticed her eyes and hoped she wouldn't do anything drastic. What are you saying, Jiraiya? The child died just like every precious person in my life, she shouted and trying to hold back the tears. Jiraiya didn't even flinch from her tone and just took his photo with Naruto and reached it out for her to grab. Tsunade noticed the photo and quickly grabbed it to see Jiraiya with a kid. She closed her eyes tightly before opening them again to look at the photo again. She noticed his red hair, exactly like Kushina's. She thought and looked at his eyes, his whiskers, his spiky hair like Minato's. His blue eyes are like an ocean, but most importantly, his smile. It was her smile. She felt her heart beating in her throat, her breath quickened, just like when she lost him. His blood in her hands. She shook her head and looked at the photo again, but she could see it as clear as day. Tears slowly started rolling down her cheek, her hands holding the picture tightly as life depended on it. She was biting her lower lip to the point of drawing blood. I'm sorry, but he didn't survive, his chakra was abnormal. I'm sorry, Tsunade-sama. Tsunade remembered the cursed words very well. She looked at the photo again. His red hair and blue eyes. Naruto-kun. Chapter 28, Godmother. Naruto. Explosion, another failed seal. Naruto couldn't understand what he was doing wrong. He was trying to create a new seal and wondered what Tojiji would think about it, but the seal kept exploding in his face, almost like it was mocking him. He sighed and started drawing again and trying to understand what he was doing wrong. He kept drawing slowly and carefully, almost afraid that it would break. Today was Sunday and a free day from academy. Naruto had created many clones to start practicing his new fire jutsu. Another 100 clones practice with style, but Naruto always made sure to put a barrier seal and chakra detection seal around to ensure no one could see what he was doing. Second, the seal prevented his chakra from being detected by anyone outside the seal. Naruto knew he could get a clone to try and make the new seal, but he wanted to do it himself, despite the seal exploding in his face over and over again. It had been 3 weeks since he arrived in the Hidden Leaf Village. The news of his arrival had spread like wildfire, but surprisingly no one tried to attack him, but Naruto could feel their negative emotions from a mile away. Naruto just ignored them and kept on with his training. During the 3 weeks, he mostly spent his time with Shikamaru and Choji. He had a few talks with Shino, who sounded smart. Kiba had avoided him at all cost. Hinata, on the other hand, blushed every time he was close. Ino had a few talks with him and even went with him and Shikamaru and Choji to eat in a restaurant. Sasuke had kept quiet since he destroyed his desk, but one thing Naruto understood was that he spent all the time training. He understood that Imo had lost his family, but it wouldn't be bad to try and have some friends and not shut yourself from the rest of the world. Naruto escaped his thoughts when he finished the first step of the seal. He applied chakra to it and exploded on his face again. Naruto was thrown across the room and hit the wall. He sighed sadly and slowly stood up on his legs. Maybe you should wait until the toad comes back. After all, he's a master in Fuinjutsu, Kurama suddenly said, getting bored of healing Naruto's body over and over again. I know that, but I would want to surprise him and complete the seal on my own, Naruto replied and fixing his broken chair with wood style. There's no shame in needing help, only a fool thinks that he can do everything on his own, Kurama replied, crossing his legs and resting his head on his paws. Naruto thought about it and decided to try a few more times. If he couldn't complete the first step until tomorrow, he would wait until Tojiji returned. He took a deep breath and decided to clear his head outside. Perhaps the sun and the songs of the forest would clear his mind. Walking outside, he soon reached the training yard. He stayed on his knees and started practicing his chakra control to a new level. His legs crossed above water, holding multiple leaves on his body and using one tail worth of chakra of Kurama. His clones made a seal so Kurama's chakra wouldn't be felt outside the seal and give the villagers extra reasons to be afraid and hate him. His whiskers grew, and his eyes turned red, his hair grew spikier, and a tail slowly grew behind his back. Kurama said that he needed this kind of chakra control exercise to make it easier when he tries 2 tails or more. You're doing well, Naruto, Kurama said, but then he noticed the trees growing all around Naruto, almost like protecting him. Naruto kept his focus on his exercise, and while he trained, someone was coming to the Hidden Leaf Village. It was a typical and peaceful day in Konoha. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and there was a nice, calm, gentle breeze coming in from the west. At the main gate of this currently tranquil shinobi village were 2 Konoha Chunin who was happily relaxing in their assigned post. Taking advantage of the serenity surrounding them, they enjoyed it all by leaning back on the 2 rear legs of their chairs and resting their feet on the desk of the entrance booth. Ah, this is the life, isn't it? Said one of the Chunin, enjoying the huge lack of traffic going in or out of their village. Yeah, nothing to do but relax, enjoy the sun, and let life pass you by slowly, said the other with a content sigh. The first guard barely opened his eyes from their closed position to stare at a passing cloud. True, but I would still give a lot for something interesting to happen, he pondered. You know the old saying, be careful about what you wish for because you just might get. The second started but immediately stopped when he felt the ground shake beneath him and nearly fell from his chair. When he regained his bearings and opened his eyes, he saw something that made him pale and freeze with fear. Senju Tsunade was back in Konoha after so long, and she was stomping towards them like some wrathful giant. For every step she took, the ground would crack in small spiderweb-like patterns, leaving a vengeful trail behind her. As she headed towards them, they could practically see a black aura emanate around her that spoke of slow, agonizing pain and death. But the thing that freaked the 2 Chunin out the most was the disturbing red fire in her eyes that would have sent even the bravest and mightiest Kage-level shinobi running for the hills. Scurrying behind Tsunade was a young teenage girl with short black hair carrying a small piglet in her arms. She seemed to be trying and failing to calm down her vengeful master with her unheard and frantic words, but they looked to be for naught. And behind her was the long white hair of Jiraiya of the Sannin, who had a big smirk on his face and didn't look to mind Tsunade's current mood, maybe for the first time in his life. As she, Jiraiya, and Tsunade passed by the Chunin, they saw that they stayed on the main path heading towards the Hokage Tower. They also could have sworn they heard Tsunade saying something about killing some poor old bastard along with all the different ways she was going to do it. As her form disappeared and joined the general populace in the distance, the two trained soldiers of Konoha quickly broke out of their stupors. The second Chunin paused before saying, "Didn't I tell you to be careful what you wish for?" The first just nodded dumbly and said, "Who do you think pissed her off that much to come back here?" "I don't know, but may Kami have mercy on his soul, for Tsunade-sama will not." Both men shivered at the thought of what the famed Senju Kunoichi would do to her unfortunate target and began to silently pray for the man who was about to painfully enter the next life at the hands of a vengeful slug princess. They could only imagine what would have also happened if they had asked her to sign in the logbook. Hokage Tower. Sarutobi finally finished his last paperwork for today. He took a deep breath and sighed in relief. It had been 3 weeks and no incidents about Naruto, and most importantly, he could finally continue his favorite book. What could go wrong now? He was about to open his secret drawer, but then he heard a loud noise coming from the corridor and a massive ki that could almost rival that of Sarutobi. His eyes widened at the familiar ki, and the screams started just as he had predicted. The ANBUs around his office were getting nervous. Before Hiruzen could actually try and do something, he heard a loud scream. "I don't care if Hi's busy, he will have plenty of time to rest once I'm done with him." The scream was heard from a very familiar person that Hiruzen didn't expect to hear anytime soon and, from what he was hearing, probably would be better not to hear anytime soon. The door burst open, and an ANBU flew and hit his body against the wall. Sarutobi glanced at the unconscious ANBU and wondered if it would be better to just lose consciousness like him and just pretend all this is a bad dream, a terrible dream. He turned to the exact source of the screams, and in front of him stood Tsunade, who looked to have a dark aura. Sarutobi now understood why not that many people liked the job of the Kage. For a moment, he thought she was using Amaterasu somehow for the dark aura around her that looked like dark flames. His brave ANBU suddenly stood in between her and him, their weapons ready, but 2 of his ANBU were already having second guesses of what exactly were they trying to do. "Tsunade-sama, please calm down, we can discuss." He was interrupted whatever he was trying to say when Tsunade cracked her knuckles. Hiruzen felt cold sweat on his face when he noticed Jiraiya behind Tsunade, but he looked calm, almost like he was enjoying what was happening. Maybe for the first time in his life, Tsunade's anger wasn't directed at him. Tsunade looked at the mini shinobis in front of her before her strength cracked the floor. The ANBU took a step back. "I give you one chance, leave now," Tsunade yelled and pointed the finger at the nearest window of the office. The ANBU exchanged looks between each other before leaving through the window. "Cowards," Hiruzen murmured under his breath, but at the same time wanted to jump from the window like that. He raised his hands, trying to ease the tension, sweat rolling down his face like a waterfall. "Tsunade is goo." He was interrupted when Tsunade grabbed him by his collar and brought his face closer to hers. Her eyes were like fire, almost burning Hiruzen. The old Hokage was sure that if looks could kill, he would be ash right now. "Cut the crap, Hiruzen, tell me, why did you lie to me about Naruto-kun?" She screamed and slammed him in his Hokage chair, almost breaking the chair along with him. Hiruzen tried to catch his breath, but he had a confused look on his face. He turned to look at Tsunade again. "I don't know what you're talking about, Tsunade, but I never told you or sent any letters saying that Naruto had died," Hiruzen stated with a more serious tone and slightly higher tone. Tsunade took a step back, not understanding. The ANBU had stated that Naruto-kun was born with abnormal chakra because of Kyubi. They even showed her the body of Naruto. She clenched her fist so hard that blood started slowly falling on the floor. Everyone in the office noticed the drops of blood. "What do you mean?" "An ANBU of yours showed me Naruto-kun," Tsunade asked, not understanding what was happening, but she swore she would get at the bottom of this. This time Hiruzen got even more confused, while Jiraiya already knew what Tsunade was talking about since she had explained to him what had happened after the Kyubi attack. "I didn't send you any ANBU, Tsunade, when I wanted to inform you that Naruto-kun was alright. You had already left the village, and couldn't find you anywhere." Sarutobi started thinking of who could have possibly lied to Tsunade until he remembered his old teammate. He sighed and decided to deal with this a bit later, once everything was cleared here. Tsunade felt her anger rising, she knew her sensei would never lie for something like this. She still trusted him despite not being in Konoha for almost 9 years. But the question remained. Who could have fooled her? And why? Tsunade didn't know who but already had a few thoughts of who could have done it. She thought about the 3 elders, and especially that rotten hawk Danzo. Taking a deep breath and trying to calm down, she looked at her sensei again, who looked deep in thoughts. "Where's Naruto?" she asked, demanding to know where he was. Sarutobi escaped his thoughts and turned his eyes at Tsunade again. "Today is Sunday, so he's probably in his house or the training yard," Sarutobi replied, and sure that Naruto would be in the training yard. Tsunade nodded her head before turning at Jiraiya, leaning against the wall, with his arms crossed. "Well, take me to him," she shouted at him. He nodded his head and left with her, this time through the door. Shizen quickly followed them behind, still keeping quiet about the whole thing. Sarutobi, on the other hand, was deep in thoughts. He needed to talk with the damn Danzo. He snapped his fingers, and an ANBU showed up in front of him. The ANBU was wearing a dark mask that looked like a ghost. Unlike the others, he had no eye holes in the mask to see. "Tell Danzo to come here," he ordered. The ANBU spoke no words and left as soon as he appeared. Jiraiya. He was leading Tsunade to the training yard. He thought that Naruto would be there. They tried to check his house. Jiraiya put the hand on the handle just for it to electrocute him and throw him to the nearest wall. Tsunade had laughed at him. Jiraiya then had blocked the seal and opened the door just for it to put him in a genjutsu, and a jutsu activated that sent a fireball towards them. All 3 of them dodged quickly. Thankfully the fireball was a small one and had disappeared in the air without harming anyone. Jiraiya made a mental note to never go inside Naruto's house without an invite. After that, they had quietly and slowly walked inside, but Jiraiya could tell that the brat wasn't inside. After that, they left to look at the training yard. He could tell that Tsunade was impressed with Naruto's ability in Fuinjutsu, but Jiraiya wasn't sure how she would react to his wood style and that he held no love for the village. Jiraiya knew Naruto didn't hate the village, but he neither loved it, he loved his homeland, and Jiraiya knew he would one day leave to rebuild his destroyed home. Reaching the training yard, Jiraiya immediately noticed the barrier seal and the excellent camouflage, and he smiled, impressed by his Fuinjutsu. He pointed the finger at the barrier. With a hand sign the camouflage disappeared, showing the barrier, and inside was Naruto in chakra cloak one tail. Trees had grown all around him. Jiraiya couldn't detect chakra coming from the barrier. At least he knew Kyuubi's chakra would not be felt around the village. While Tsunade looked at her godson with her eyes widened, Jiraiya had informed her that Naruto knew about the Kyuubi, his parents, and that he apparently had a good friendship with the Kyuubi. She couldn't understand how he could have a friendship with the demon that killed his parents. But what caught her by surprise was the trees around Naruto, almost like they were protecting him. Before anyone could say anything, Naruto opened his eyes, and the chakra cloak slowly disappeared. His eyes, whiskers, and nails slowly turned normal. His red hair turned normal. He had noticed that his Tojiji had arrived with 2 new people he hadn't felt before, but what caught his attention was that the chakra of one of them was slightly similar to his. He had asked for a long time his connection with the Senju clan, and perhaps his godmother had the answers. He stood on his legs and noticed the trees around him. The leaves around him had burned to ash since whenever he used Kurama's chakra, his fire affinity was more dominant than his other affinities. He slowly walked in front of who he knew was Tsunade-sama, his godmother. He didn't recognize the woman beside her. Naruto was about to open his mouth and greet her, but he was interrupted when she grabbed him and hugged him as life depended on it. Naruto's eyes widened, and he quickly hugged her back and heard her sobbing. "Naruto-kun, you're alive. You are here," she said, not believing her eyes. Naruto smiled and felt happiness in his entire body. After a minute of hugging, Tsunade slowly pushed back to look at him. "Let me look at you," she said with a soft tone and looking at his face from every angle. She couldn't help but notice Minato on his face. "You're so handsome, I'm sure every girl in the academy looks at you," she said, smiling. Naruto blushed in embarrassment and lowered his head. Tsunade laughed at his behavior. Naruto then turned to look at Tojiji. "Tojiji, is good to see you," Naruto greeted him. Jiraiya smiled but decided to mess with him. "Oh really? I saw how happy you are with the traps you had left on your doorstep. Who knows how many you left inside the house?" Jiraiya joking and rubbing his head behind his head. Naruto laughed. "If I knew you would come, I would have deactivated them," he replied. Tsunade laughed at the nickname. Naruto then turned to the third person. "My name is Naruto, miss." My name is Shizen, and this one here is our pig, Tun, Shizen said. Naruto-kun, how about we go and eat something? Tsunade suggested and made a mental note to ask Jiraiya later about the Mokuton ability of Naruto. The redhead nodded in agreement and decided to go to Ichiraka Ramen. They soon reached the Ichiraka Ramen. Walking inside, Naruto could feel the delicious smell around the air. He sat, and Tsunade decided to sit close to him. I noticed Naruto first and immediately walked up to them. Naruto-kun, is good to see you again, she said, smiling and hugging Naruto. She then noticed the blonde woman and Jiraiya-sama. She quickly bowed her head in respect. Is it good to have you here, Jiraiya-sama and Tsunade-sama? She said respectfully. No need for that, 3 bowls with ramen and 1 big special ramen, Jiraiya ordered. Tsunade wondered who the big ramen was for but remembered Kushina, and she realized that Naruto loved ramen as much as his mother. So Naruto-kun, tell me, how are you doing in the village? Have you made any friends? She asked, knowing how Jinchurikis were usually treated. Naruto frowned slightly but quickly changed it to a smile, something that the Sanins noticed. Is alright, Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji are good friends, and the academy is fun. I think, he replied, not wanting to mention that all the teachers except Irika straight up hated him. Something that the students in the class noticed. Tsunade wanted to ask more in detail, but if Naruto didn't want to talk about it, she decided not to pressure him. Is good to have friends, but who took care of you while you grew up? Tsunade asked curiously since she was sure that someone must have raised him. She knew Naruto was apparently living alone in an apartment. Naruto sighed. No one really, except for Hokage Jiji and Toad Jiji. I pretty much grew up alone. In the orphanage, but that changed when I reached 4 years old. Toad Jiji took me to train in Mount Mayaboku for 3 years and 3 months and go around the world for 9 months, he replied smiling, and the ramen came. Tsunade bit her lower lip, not wanting to go to his old sensei and break his neck for letting Naruto grow up alone. She didn't need to know how the idiots around here treated him. Their glares until they reached the ramen restaurant were enough to let her know that Naruto was hated just like how every Jinchuriki. The second thing she didn't know and found surprising was that Naruto had started training so young and so hard. Jiraiya mentioned to her about his super strength, and she wondered about it. So Naruto, Jiraiya told me you have powerful fists, she said, eating ramen but then noticed that Naruto had already eaten his big special ramen. Just like Kushina. She thought, smiling. Naruto ordered a second one before turning to his godmother. Yes, I found out when I was training in Mount Mayaboku. I have grown more powerful, but problems with controlling them, he replied. Tsunade nodded in understanding since she had the same problems herself when she first started using her strength. Well, I can help you. Everybody knows me about my super strength, she suggested, and Naruto beamed. Thank you, Tsunade-san, he replied and returned to his ramen. Sarutobi. Taking a deep breath and smoking a bit from his pipe, he saw the door opening, and inside came his favorite teammate. You asked for me, Hokage-sama, Danzo said, trying to sound normal, but Hiruzen could clearly see right through his emotionless mask. Yes, Danzo Shimura, I need to ask you a few questions, and you should answer truthfully, he stated, leaking ki. Danzo narrowed his eyes slightly before sitting close to the desk of the Hokage. I got information that someone had apparently spread misinformation that Naruto had died in the Kyuubi attack. Any idea who could have done that? Sarutobi asked, leaking ki and looking straight in the eye. Danzo kept his gaze and did not flinch. I don't know who could have done that, he replied quietly. Sarutobi kept quiet, and silence took over the office. His fingers pinched the nose on his bridge and turned his cold eyes at Danzo again. You're free to go, he stated, and Danzo stood up and left without saying another word but still could feel the burning gaze of Sarutobi on his back. Leaving the office, he thought about a way to deal with the Kyuubi brat. I might need to visit the snake, he thought. Ashera. She was doing hand seals in front of the lake. She finished her last and shouted, Uzumaki style, water phoenix. The water in the lake suddenly changed and formed a phoenix in the air. The phoenix then flew and hit the wall and destroyed it into little pieces. Debris fell to the ground. Ashera smiled, happy that she could do the jutsu. She was about to look for Fu to let her know that she had completed her first A-rank jutsu when she heard the sound of a bird. She turned around to see a tree and in a branch was the red bird made of fire. This is not a dream, Ashera quickly said and walked closer. The bird kept quiet and flew away. Ashera followed him, he kept flying, and she kept chasing. Suddenly she saw the bird resting against the handle of a door. Asha slowly walked up to the handle and opened it to see a completely different place. The door shut violently behind her, and she saw the ruined houses. It felt like a war had just happened there. She saw the symbol of the Uzumaki clan in every house and building. She felt the cold to her bones, shivers running through her body like blades, piercing her flesh and skin. "Look up," a voice said. Asha looked up to see something descending from the clouds. She couldn't see what but looked to be made of fire itself. Find us. Chapter 29, Family. Naruto, after 1 week. He slept in his new house. After returning, his godmother returned to the Senju compound. Naruto had helped clean the house with his clones. Tsunade then invited Naruto to stay in her compound if he wished, since that's where she would live. Naruto had agreed, and after sealing all the important things, he went to the Senju compound. Shizen and Tsunade were the only ones with him, not that Naruto complained. After arriving, his godmother had told him that he could go everywhere around the house. Naruto had nodded his head and had explored the compound. It was extremely large, with enough place for 100 or more people to live. It had 5 different training yards. But what caught Naruto's attention was to check if Hashirama-sama had left any wood-style jutsu. She had told him to check the library. The seal used to protect the scrolls was a blood seal. And surprisingly, it worked when Naruto used his blood. He checked the scrolls about wood style. He finds different jutsus like wood style, deep forest emergency. The jutsu created a large forest, large enough to build a small village. The jutsu could be used in defense, offense, and control. The wood could absorb the chakra of the enemy and could be used to control Bijou. The jutsu was high S rank. Naruto also found the famous dragon wood jutsu of Hashirama-sama. Wood style, dragon forest. The jutsu was offensive, which could block someone's movement. Could absorb the chakra, and the dragon could cause damage to the enemy. S rank. Naruto had read many other wood jutsus, but only after getting permission from his godmother. She told him that he was the only wood user that could use them in any way possible. Naruto opened his eyes to see the light shining through the window, and he used his hand to block the light from coming to his eyes. Naruto looked around and didn't see anyone, not that he was expecting to see anyone. Slowly standing up, he stretched his legs and arms and wore his clothes. He tightened his katana on his hips and decided to train in kenjutsu. Naruto was training on his kenjutsu. He grew 10 trees and used his katana to slice them. Right now, he was trying to learn the Uzumaki-style kenjutsu. It was a very advanced one. Tojiji had even mentioned that it would be hard to learn how to do it without a sensei in kenjutsu. Sadly, Jiraiya didn't know kenjutsu, and neither did Tsunade. Kakashi's kenjutsu was very limited, and he wouldn't be able to teach him that much. Naruto wasn't bothered by it. He was determined to learn independently, no matter how hard it was. Uzumaki-style kenjutsu was one of the best styles in the world. That style gave his mother the nickname, the Red Death of Konoha. He moved the katana around his hands before turning around and slicing 3 trees in front of him. The trees slowly fell to the ground. Naruto tried to catch his breath. He used his sleeve to wipe away the sweat on his forehead. Naruto looked at his sword, a smile on his face, and slowly returned to his scabbard. Despite being forged a long time ago, the blade was as sharp as the day made. Tsunade had mentioned that the sword was made by one of the best metals, could efficiently channel the chakra in the blade. Naruto slowly walked back inside the compound. Right now, he was alone since his godmother and Shizen had started working on the hospital of the Konoha. Naruto was happy about it. She was known as the best medic in the world for a reason, after all. Naruto looked around and couldn't help but notice the wood used for the compound. The wood had good light color, with beautiful carvings everywhere. The wood was soft to rest your head on it. The wood around the main room had the symbol of the Senju clan carved in the center of the room. The main room was large enough to have 30 people inside, and it had many tables and different decorations. Naruto rested on the couch of his room. He had a TV in it, but he never used it. The fridge was full of food and even sweets if he wanted. His godmother had used the money of the Senju clan account to buy important things for the house. Naruto kept his gaze at the ceiling. He thought about Fuchan and Asha-chan. He hoped they were alright and hoped to meet them as soon as possible. He thought about the orange eyes of Fu, the long beautiful hair of Ashera. It seems someone has fallen in love, Kurama suddenly said, trying hard not to laugh. Naruto blushed from embarrassment. Is not like that, he screamed, completely forgetting that he didn't need to. Oh really, you might try to fool someone else, but I know your thoughts, and I wasn't the one thinking about Fu or Ashera, Kurama teased him with an evil smirk. Naruto opened his mouth to yell at his foolishness, but closed it but then opened it again. And closed it again. "Shut up, stupid fox," he finally said and decided to rest on the couch and possibly sleep. After some time, Naruto slept, and the seal on his stomach started glowing red, and the spiral in the center began slowly moving in center. The drawings around the spiral started growing and filling the empty space, and the seal now started growing red lines that slowly advanced to his forehead. The ring had grown that almost went completely black. Kurama could feel something was happening. The red lines reached his face, but the seal suddenly stopped, and the lines retreated to the seal. And the seal turned back to normal black before disappearing. Kurama narrowed his eyes to the strange thing that was happening. He didn't know what it meant and hoped that wasn't anything terrible. Tsunade. She was returning from her job in the hospital. It was almost sunset, and Shizen was beside her. Things have changed drastically for her and Shizen. From returning to the village and now raising Naruto. She knew he didn't need someone to take care of him since he had shown that he could take care of himself multiple times. From learning how to wash his clothes, preparing food, cleaning the house, and knowing how to fight. His talent as a shinobi was astonishing but at the same time bothered her slightly, since Naruto had spent a long time of his childhood more like a shinobi rather than a kid that needed to spend his time playing and having friends around. She could tell that the village despised Naruto. Not only that, but Jiraiya had told her about the mobs and what happened before he took him to Mount Myaboku. Tsunade always knew the Jinchuriki wasn't loved but to beat a child was too much. Jiraiya told her that Naruto was the one who killed them with his wood style. According to him, no one else besides Sensei and them knew about the Mokuton ability of Naruto. Tsunade hoped Danzo didn't find out, but she still thought that the Rotten Hawk was the one to lie to her about Naruto so that he could have a chance to have his hands on him. Jiraiya had then explained his reasons to train Naruto. She didn't know the deal with the Akatsuki, but whatever it was, is not a good one. He had then told her about his wish to go back to Uzushiogakure and rebuild it. She couldn't help but remember that Kushina had wanted the same thing. The only things stopping her were her ties with Konoha, being a shinobi of the village, Minato, and being Jinchuriki of the Kyubi. She soon reached her compound. "Tsunade-san, do you think Naruto will want to train in medical?" Shizen suddenly asked beside her. Tsunade put the finger on her chin, thought about it, and didn't know the answer. She hadn't asked Naruto yet about it. The only thing she trained him so far was his super strength, but that was all she taught him. To say she had been surprised when Naruto told her that he used 350 pounds on his legs and 330 pounds on his arms would be an understatement. That was way too much training, according to Tsunade. She turned her head to Shizen and shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know Shizen, perhaps he might want, but he will need perfect chakra control to do that, and having the Kyubi doesn't help him in that," she replied, walking inside her house. "Maybe, but I still think you should ask him," she suggested. Tsunade sighed. Naruto already had his hands full with training, fuinjutsu, ninjutsu, and kenjutsu. The only thing he didn't care much to train was genjutsu, and only because he had the Kyubi. "I will ask him tomorrow morning," she replied and put the scrolls with things they bought in the market on the table in the main room. "I'm gonna check on him," she stated and left to see if he was in his room or the training yard. She reached his room and opened the door slowly to see him sleeping. She thought he looked peaceful like that. She sneaked in and kissed his forehead before quietly leaving the room. "Naruto." He opened his eyes and understood where he was. He yawned and then remembered that it was apparently morning. "Kurama, how long was I asleep?" Naruto suddenly asked since it had been around 10 a.m. yesterday when he went to sleep. "Congratulations, Naruto, you have slept for almost a day," Kurama replied, smirking. Naruto groaned in annoyance but then wondered how could he have slept for such a long time. Sighing, he decided to see if Tsunade-san was around or if he needed to prepare his food. Just as he was about to go to the door opened to reveal Shizen. "Naruto, good morning, Tsunade-san has prepared your food, and she wants to talk with you," she said kindly and left the room after Naruto nodded his head. He dressed up and left the room. Soon reaching the main hall, he saw Tsunade-san drinking tea and reading something in a scroll. She turned when she heard footsteps. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," she greeted him smiling. "Good morning, Tsunade-san." Naruto greeted her back and sat at the table where they ate food. Soon Shizen came with the prepared food. It was miso soup, omuresu, bread with honey, and sukiyaki. Naruto liked the smell and started with miso soup. "Thank you for the food, Shizen-chan," Naruto said, liking the taste. Shizen smiled kindly and started eating bread with honey and sukiyaki. Tsunade ate omuresu. After eating, Naruto drank tea with his godmother, who looked deep in thoughts. There was silence among them, and Naruto noticed the glances Shizen was giving Tsunade-san. Finally breaking the silence, Tsunade put the cup of tea on the table and turned to look at Naruto. "Naruto, I have been wondering if you would want to learn medic?" she asked. Naruto raised his eyebrows since he didn't expect this question. He then thought about it, but he hadn't ever thought to learn it. To be a medical shinobi requires almost perfect chakra control. Naruto knew his chakra control wasn't bad, it was perfect, remembering that he had a giant fur ball on his tummy. Kurama growled loudly at the disrespectful name. Kids these days don't have respect for their elders, Kurama thought, and decided to try and sleep. Again. "Well, I can try, but I don't think I can be that good," Naruto replied, since it was worth a shot. Tsunade smiled happily. "Well then, tomorrow you will come with me to the hospital. First, you need to see and be prepared with what kind of injury you can see, and then we can start with your training," she said with a stern tone, and gone was the loving godmother tone. It could often happen that a shinobi couldn't handle the amount of injury, the things they see in combat, and therefore not be suitable for a medic shinobi. That's why Tsunade required Naruto first to see if he could handle it before actually training him in medic. Naruto finished his food and decided to go to the training yard. Before he felt a hand on his shoulder, he turned around to see Tsunade-san. She smiled before turning him to her. "Where are you going, young man?" she asked. Naruto looked confused. "I wanted to go to the training yard and start training," he replied, keeping his hands behind his head. Tsunade thought that maybe he could do something else that doesn't revolve around training, but she knew Naruto wouldn't be comfortable with the stupid stares and the words thrown at him. She understood that Naruto didn't have that much else to do besides training and reading books. "Very well, I want you to train with me today," she stated. Naruto looked even more confused but decided to see what he could do against the strongest kunoichi in the world if he could do anything to begin with. "Challenge accepted," Naruto replied with a smile that Tsunade recognized very well. Naruto started walking towards the training, followed by Tsunade, who couldn't help but notice that Naruto reminded her of someone other than Minato and Kushi. The second day she arrived in Konoha, she had asked Naruto for a blood sample. The first reason was to see if he was healthy, and the second was to see if his DNA was similar to hers because of his wood style. Sadly, it would take around 9 months for the tests to arrive, but it was worth it. They soon reached the training yard, and Naruto stretched his legs and arms. Tsunade just waited for him to be done while noticing the worried look of Shizen. "Well, Naruto, before we start, don't hold back against me, and if you want, even use your Kyuubi chakra cloak," she stated thoughtfully and cracked her knuckles. Naruto wasn't afraid of what she was doing and decided to remove his weights immediately. He did a hand sign, and the weights were off. Tsunade noticed it and smirked. Naruto started channeling his chakra around his fists before putting his hands on the grass and launching at Tsunade like an arrow. Tsunade was surprised by his speed, and Naruto hit her in the shoulder but quickly got over the surprise and moved with medium Kage speed, grabbed his hand, and threw him against the nearest wall, causing the wall to crumble. Naruto felt the pain in his back and clenched his teeth. Taking a deep breath, Naruto did a hand sign, and 3 clones appeared around him. Tsunade took a few steps before avoiding the first 3 punches and then quickly punching 2 clones. The third clone did a few hand sign. "Multi-shuriken jutsu," he yelled, and a giant shuriken flew towards her, multiple in 9 shurikens. She quickly jumped up to a tree before noticing Naruto behind her throwing another shuriken. He did the same jutsu, and she dodged them in midair, but one of them transformed into a Naruto and was in front of her with a punch. "Take this," he yelled before his fists made contact with her hands, and the ground around the split, creating a small crater. Naruto quickly jumped away, seeing his godmother that just shrugged his fist like it was nothing. "Impressive, Naruto, but I know you're still holding back," she yelled before rushing at him. Naruto knew he couldn't handle her fists. He channels his chakra in his skin, puts his hands in front of her fist, and is thrown away by the strength. Naruto hit his back against a tree, and his stone-like skin turned to normal. Tsunade noticed his way of defense and had to be impressed. "You channel your chakra in your skin to make it stronger and more durable," she stated. She knew he had earth affinity, but to be able to do that was impressive. Naruto stood on his legs before releasing his chakra storage seal. His whole body was engulfed in blue chakra. He channeled his extra chakra in his right hand. The chakra around his right fist slowly changed form and looked like a dragon. "Here I come," Naruto yelled before moving with medium Jonin speed. Tsunade smirked and stood her ground. Naruto's fist made contact with her right hand, and the ground exploded, the debris fell. Shizen rushed to see the smoke moving away, revealing Naruto, who had actually forced Tsunade to move away a bit from the strength of his fist. Tsunade felt her hand numb from his strength and was impressed, and she knew he still could use the one-tail cloak that probably made him much stronger. She then started clapping. Naruto raised his head smiling, his right hand hurting like hell. The sweat was coming from his face like a waterfall. "Well done, Naruto, tomorrow we will start your training with your punches like never before," Tsunade stated before walking away. Naruto smiled, happy that he was able to impress her. Shizen walked to him and started healing his hands, but it didn't take long since Kurama did the same thing. Naruto soon started walking inside the compound and started thinking about the next time he met Fu and Ashera. "Ka-chan, I will soon rebuild Yuzushiogakure, our clan will not be forgotten." Rashi. The sound of rain was everywhere around him. As he jumped from tree to tree, he was making his way to Han. He needed to let him know about his decision. His eyes glanced at the seal on his wrist, and it was a week ago when his Phoenix seal started reacting. He knew someone had made the first contact with the Phoenix contract, not entirely a member but still was something that meant there was someone out there, another Uzumaki out there. He wondered where they could be and how old was the person. Since it was the first step in Phoenix contract, it meant the person was young, most likely. The only Uzumaki he knew was Kushina Uzumaki, but she had died almost 9 years ago. It had hurt him when he heard the news. He had tried to have some kind of contact with her, but the damn Anoki only let Han in the war against Konoha, and he was in constant watch every day. The seal on his wrist looked like a small red bird, spreading his wings with an empty dark circle in the center. He soon reached Han's home. He looked around but didn't see anyone. He landed on the ground and saw the door opening. Han walked outside almost like he was expecting him. He slightly scratched his hair. "Took you long enough, what's the occasion?" Han asked with his other hand in his pocket. Rashi said nothing but instead moved away from the sleeve of his right hand and showed the seal glowing red. Han looked surprised but then smiled at his friend. "I see, when will you leave?" he asked, slightly sad that Rashi would leave. The old Uzumaki noticed but kept a neutral face. "Tomorrow, I have already sealed everything," he replied and wondered if Han would want to tag along, but he knew Han would never want to be a traitor to IWA. Despite never liking to be ordered around, he was always a loyal shinobi of IWA. Han nodded his head before turning his eyes to look at Rashi's purple eyes. "Good luck, and remember, if you ever need my help, I'm around here," he said and walked close to Rashi. He reached out his hand. Rashi smiled and shook his hand. To the end, to the end. Chapter 30, a Genin. 4 years later. The morning sun shined down on the world from a clear, nearly cloudless sky. It was another one of the beautiful days the land of fire was known for. The songs of birds and the cries of cicadas could be heard flowing along with the slight breeze that flowed through the area as the forest critters went about facing another day of life. As the sun rays bathed the land in its light and warmth and the sounds of nature echoed through the land. The hidden leaf village looked bright. People had woken up and started doing their jobs, opening the stores and the restaurants. The students of the academy were making their way towards the academy. Today was the Genin exams. Many were excited to start their journey as shinobi, dreaming of saving important people and defeating the bad guys. But one wasn't walking towards the academy. The said boy was in the training yard, his head leaning against a tree, his red hair reaching his shoulders with 2 fangs that reached his ears. Naruto had his eyes closed, and a leaf slowly started falling from the tree to his chest. Naruto now was 13 years old, and he was wearing a maroon jacket with the symbol of Uzumaki on the back, with a blue shirt underneath, his sword lying close to him. Naruto's face looked sharp, his blue eyes looked even bluer, his muscles could be seen, his six-packs and developed chest gave him a look of superiority. He had grown extremely handsome. Many girls in the academy looked at him with literal hearts in their eyes. He wore blue ninja sandals and white pants. His weights on his legs had gone from 350 pounds to 700 pounds on his legs and 650 pounds on his arms. The leaf on his chest slowly turned ablaze and burned, his eyes changed from blue to red. Despite using Kurama's chakra, his chakra wasn't leaking, no one could sense him unless an excellent sensor was around. The grass around him slowly burned to ash. After a few minutes, Naruto's eyes turned normal, and he opened his eyes to see the forest full of life. He stood up and tightened his sword on his hips, his hands behind his head, rubbing his hair. He looked up to see his sensei. "The academy has started," Kakashi-sensei said, looking down at him. His orange book in his hands and read it before glancing at Naruto again. The redhead didn't mind his sensei reading the book. He knew what it was about but never read it himself. To say Naruto was surprised when he understood what Jiraiya-sensei did when he said research would be an understatement. He didn't like his sensei peeping on bathhouses but still didn't try to tell him to stop or anything. He had his hobbies just like everyone else. Despite all that, Naruto liked to spend time with the older man. His job didn't let him spend that much time with Naruto, that's why the redhead enjoyed his moments with his godfather. Don't worry, Kakashi-sensei, no matter how much I train with you, I will never be late, Naruto replied with a slight smirk and was ready to go to the academy. Kakashi laughed a little at his words and I smiled. You never know, after all, you know what they say. You become just like the company you keep around, he replied and gave him a thumbs up before disappearing and leaving leaves behind. Naruto smiled and started walking towards the academy. After Tsunade had arrived back in the village, Jiraiya-sensei had stated that now he could spend more time on his spy network since Naruto had his godmother around. Tojiji still visited but only once 7 to 10 months. Naruto had been sad to hear that, but still, he understood the importance of his work. After Jiraiya had left, Kakashi had asked if he wanted to train. Naruto had accepted, smiling at his old man sensei. Of course, Naruto hadn't stopped calling Kakashi an old man despite his complaints and murmuring that the new generation had no respect whatsoever. Naruto just grinned at his complaints. Kakashi-sensei had taught Naruto a few fire jutsus and trained him in taijutsu. Kakashi always liked to train with Naruto. The Jonin knew Naruto was a prodigy like his father, and he knew Naruto was already strong enough to fight and give Kakashi a run for his money. But he didn't quite understand why Naruto was still in the academy, but the redhead had stated that he wanted to become a genin at the same time with his friends. Kakashi was happy to hear that Naruto values his friends that much. He accepted his answer and had just changed the subject. During the 4 years, Kakashi had talked with Naruto about his time training under Minato-sensei. Naruto was happy to hear all his stories. Kakashi had talked about his mother, too, saying that Kushina was like a mother to him. Her attitude, her smile, even Kakashi had stated that Naruto smiled just like Kushina. Despite trusting Kakashi-sensei, Naruto never showed his full strength against him. The only ones that knew his full strength were Tsunade-chan, Shizen-chan, Tojiji, and Hokage-jiji. Naruto mostly kept his knowledge in Fuinjutsu a secret. In the last 4 years, Naruto had reached and fully learned level X of Fuinjutsu. The only problem was that there was no book whatsoever when it came to level 11 or higher. Jiraiya-sensei had stated that he could find more knowledge about Fuinjutsu only in Uzumaki. When it came to Fuinjutsu, Jiraiya had told him that the highest level in Fuinjutsu is level XX, but he stated that only one man could reach that level, and he reached it after a whole life of learning only Fuinjutsu. Naruto was impressed with that, but he knew he couldn't reach that level. Of course, Naruto hadn't been in Uzumaki yet to even start level 11, but he hoped to see his homeland soon. He had decided to use his Mokuton to rebuild Uzumaki. His strongest ninjutsu so far was Fire Rasengan. Naruto was able to combine Rasengan with his fire affinity to create a stronger Rasengan. But he felt that Rasengan could be even stronger. The new Rasengan looked like a fire sphere with flames leaking around and burning the ground. Fire Rasengan, low S rank. Cost, high damage to the user's hand and, if used more than 2 times without resting, could cause permanent damage to the point of losing an arm. When it came to his kenjutsu, Naruto had almost learned the Uzumaki style, but he still needed to understand it fully. He lacked using it against strong opponents. Despite all that, Kakashi-sensei told him that he was very good at kenjutsu. The only part he seriously lacked was genjutsu. Short, he sucked it. And couldn't do much. His genjutsu level was next to 0. But Kurama had reassured him that he could break genjutsu thrown at him if his enemy used genjutsu. Naruto had also created a genjutsu counter seal. The seal worked to immediately notice if the user was under a genjutsu by feeling the user's chakra. The moment the seal detected a genjutsu, the seal activated, causing his chakra system to break it and even causing pain in the body if the first way didn't work. The only problem was that the seal couldn't detect high-ranking genjutsu like Deathbed, Raining Scream, Mud Blood, Sorrow and Despair, Yum, and others. When it came to controlling Kurama's chakra, he could reach 3 tails without losing control. The 4 tails proved extremely hard to control, and the dark thoughts were almost 5 times stronger in 4 tails state. Both Tsunade and Jiraiya had been there when he had tried 4 tails, and it hadn't gone well. Naruto had tried to think of positive thoughts, but the visions didn't stop, and the voice in his head made matters worse. Thankfully the seal on his stomach had reacted and had stopped him before he could do any damage, but it had taken a full minute for the 4 tails state to go away. When his chakra cloak had disappeared, Naruto's skin had red lines all around his body, especially on his forehead. The lines formed what looked like a shining star. The lines then had slowly gone back to the seal. Jiraiya-sensei had said that he had no idea why his body looked like that and why the seal had done that. Naruto hadn't tried Four Tails ever since that, 7 months ago, and the visions he had seen made it hard to want to try again. Since he had been in Taki, Naruto hadn't seen either Fu or Ashera, and he hoped to see them soon. Naruto thought of how Fu and Ashera would look like now. He remembered them very well and hoped to see them soon. He had the highest points when it came to academy. Despite his teachers trying to sabotage him a few times, all their tries had gone down the drain. Right now, Iruka-sensei was the only teacher along with Mizuki, who was his assistant. Naruto knew Mizuki hated him, but he didn't let it bother him. The civil council had bitched and moaned many times, saying that the demon was gaining power, but all their complaints had been silenced the moment Tsunade had told them that Naruto was the reason she was back in the village. But despite all that, many people in the village still hated him with a burning hatred, glaring at him and throwing insults, hoping they would land and that he would lose control and do what they thought and hoped he would do. 9 months after Tsunade had returned, the DNA test had been completed showing that Naruto's DNA was very similar to Tsunade Senju. Hokage Gigi had concluded that Minato must have been a Senju somehow, but that brought more questions than answers. He had suggested that Naruto should carry the Senju name, but the redhead had declined, saying that he wouldn't change his Uzumaki name. He appreciated it but didn't want it changed. He was an Uzumaki through and through, and he didn't want to be anything else. Still, Hokage Gigi had insisted for him to carry both Senju and Uzumaki's name. Naruto had the names Senju and Uzumaki on his letters, and Tsunade-bachan had been happy to hear that she had a family. Naruto was slowly making his way to the academy, and he wasn't in any hurry to reach it in time. But his thoughts went to his friends. The last 4 years, he had become good friends with Shikamaru, Choji, Shino, and Ino. Sasuke keeps avoiding him at all times and always only cares about himself. He kept his emotionless face and just answered with HNN. Naruto had not tried again to be friends with him, and if he didn't want to be friends, then he wouldn't beg to be his friends. Sakura kept her fangirl attitude that Naruto disliked. Every time she entered the class, she would start with her screech, Sasuke-kun. Naruto found her completely worthless. She still could become better and become a true kunoichi, but she better start doing that sooner rather than later. Ino, on the other hand, was still a fangirl, but she still trained slightly, at least. And she had stopped running after Sasuke but instead kept her gaze at Naruto and would usually try to start a conversation with him. The redhead liked that she wasn't like Sakura and some other girls. Of course, she was still a fangirl but at least took her kunoichi job more seriously. Shino didn't talk much, but that's how he was, but every time he spoke sense and did not say nonsense things. He was thoughtful, and that's what was necessary. Kiba had avoided Naruto mostly. Since his humiliation, he kept a distance from the Uzumaki. They had talked a few times, but he still kept his distance. Akamaru, on the other hand, liked Naruto and sometimes would lick Naruto. Hinata, well, she would blush every time Naruto was around. Of course, Naruto understood the Hyuga girl apparently liked him. Hell, she had even stalked him a few times. Naruto had been slightly annoyed by it. Instead of chasing him, she should find the courage to talk to him. Naruto had tried to talk and even invited her to come with him and his friends to a restaurant to eat, hoping that would help with her shyness and find courage, but instead of accepting, she had fainted. Naruto soon reached the academy, and a few students and teachers were looking at him, surprised to see him with a sword tightened to his hips. Since he had joined, Naruto had only mentioned to friends that he used a katana but never took it in the academy. He soon reached the class and opened the door, and his friends were sitting together and one empty seat for him. Ino sat close to their desk with Hinata. "Good morning, guys," Naruto greeted them, and they welcomed him back. Naruto slowly reached his seat and turned to look at Shikamaru, who had fallen asleep after greeting him. Naruto's sweat dropped behind his head. He still couldn't understand how he could sleep so fast, just like with Iruka's secret big head jutsu. He never revealed how he could do that and perhaps would stay a mystery. "Naruto, is good to see you. I see you have brought your katana," Choji said, eating chips and offering him some. Naruto took a few and nodded his head. "Yes, it is the Genin exam, and I wanted to show everything for the last day," he replied smiling. Shikamaru grunted and slowly raised his head. "Troublesome, I hope that's not the case, Naruto. I don't think Konoha can afford to build a new academy," he stated, half asleep. Naruto rubbed his hair while the others looked confused. Why they would need a new academy? Don't worry, Shika, nothing will happen to the academy, he replied. I take you will earn the Rookie of the Year. Why is that? Because you're the best shinobi of the academy, Shino suddenly said with his quiet voice. Naruto turned his head to him. He shrugged his shoulders and was about to reply when, you're blind, Shino. Sasuke-kun will be the Rookie of the Year, he's a prodigy, my mother confirmed it, and she's in the council, Sakura shouted, and the whole class needed to cover their ears from the screech. Naruto turned his head to her, already bored of her attitude. Sakura, no offense but Sasuke is everything but a prodigy, he stated, annoyed. Sakura pointed the finger at him. Ha, you are just jealousy, she replied, screeching. Naruto just raised his eyebrows. Why would I be jealousy? And a prodigy are the likes of Kakashi Hatake who became a Genin 5 years old, Chunin 6 years old and a Jonin 12 years old, he stated, and that grabbed the attention of everyone in the class. Even Sasuke looked interested in what Naruto was saying. A prodigy are the likes of Minato Namikaze, he became Jonin when he was only 14 years old, and a Hokage shortly after and was known as the fastest person in the world. A prodigy are the likes of Hashirama Senju of the Mokuton and the strongest shinobi who could be rivaled only by Madara Uchiha, the strongest Uchiha ever to exist so far, he stated, and everyone looked surprised at what Naruto had said. Sasuke looked surprised and slightly angry with what Naruto had said. If that was true, then he was nothing special, the best he was above average. Naruto, of course, wanted to mention Itachi Uchiha since he was the youngest Anbu. Still, he knew that would make Sasuke angry and mentioning a traitor who slaughtered his clan wouldn't look well, despite Naruto finding the whole thing suspicious. He remembered Itachi when he came with his mother to the orphanage, he had guarded Naruto for some time, and not once had Naruto felt any negative emotions coming from the Uchiha prodigy. The class kept quiet after what Naruto said, and they just had a small talk with each other. Naruto talked with Shikamaru and Choji about who would be in which team. Soon Irika-sensei walked inside the room, followed by Mizuki. He looked around the class and was relieved not to hear shouts, and mostly the class was quiet. Well, today will be the Genin exams, the first part is the throwing exam, everyone follows me, he stated with a stern tone, and everyone followed behind. Naruto kept his hands behind his head and followed, being quiet but inside, thinking of Mizuki's extra amount of hostility. Soon they reached the small training yard of the academy. Naruto saw 3 dummies and 5 targets in a nearby tree. The targets were in the branches, and one of them was at the top of the tree. Irika cleared his throat and turned to look at his class. They had grown quite a bit since he first saw them. He looked at Naruto and couldn't help but be impressed. At first, he thought Naruto would be troubled but instead, he was the Rookie of the Year. Very well, one by one, you will throw your kunai or shurikens in the dummies. After that, you move to the targets in the tree. You pass if you can hit 3 out of 20 targets. If you hit the one at the top of the tree, you earn extra points, he stated with a stern voice. The whole class nodded their heads and, one by one, took turns. Shino hit 16 targets out of 20 targets. 4 in each of the dummies. And 4 hits in the targets in the tree. Shikamaru hit 11 out of 20 targets. He only hit one of them in the tree since he found it troublesome to jump in the air to hit some of them. Kiba hit 12 out of 20 targets. In the tree, he got 2 hits. Ino hit 9 out of 20 targets, hitting 1 in the tree, and smiling when she saw her result. She gave Sakura a smirk and told her to try and do better. Sakura had a determined look and looked over her shoulder at Sasuke before going there and showing her skill. Sasuke is looking at me. I will show him and impress him, she whispered before taking her stance and throwing her shurikens. She got 3 out of 20 targets, the minimum needed to pass, a second after she threw them and saw the result. Ino started laughing out loud and lying on the ground, and holding her stomach. Irika looked disappointed but decided to just go on with it. Choji got 7 out of 20, earning a smile from Shika and Naruto. Sasuke started walking towards them, some of the girls started screaming about how cool he looked when he walked. He took his shurikens and hit all the targets in the dummies, and turned at the tree. For the tree, he took 4 shurikens and 2 kunais, earning a confused look from Irika. He took a deep breath before jumping high in the air and first throwing 4 of his shurikens in the targets, before quickly grabbing his kunais and throwing one at the target in the top and throwing the second kunai to make sure that it hit the final target. When he landed back, he looked up to see his final target wasn't bullseye but close. He clenched his fists but decided to calm and turned at the class, ignoring the shouts of the girls. He only focused on Naruto, who smiled at him. Finally, it was Naruto's turn. When he went to grab the shurikens that Mizuki brought, He could just by looking at them understand that they weren't real blades but made by soft material. A material like this one would most likely never stick at the target, let alone penetrate. Naruto then smirked and took his shurikens. He added wind chakra before throwing at full strength. The shurikens cut through and hit the wall and stuck in the wall. Everyone looked surprised except Shikamaru and Shino, who knew Naruto kept his true strength a secret. Naruto then turned to the tree and jumped twice as high and threw his kunais. They penetrated the tree like nothing and hit the ground with enough strength to cause it to split. Irika kept his mouth wide open, and his jaw hit the ground, and not believing his eyes. Mizuki clenched his fist and teeth almost to the point of breaking his teeth. Naruto turned and walked back to the class as nothing had ever happened. The course soon got over their shock, and the girls started screaming for Naruto and calling him handsome and strong. The redhead high-fived with Shikamaru, Choji, and Shino. Irika got over his surprise and then informed how many points each one had. Soon after the throwing exam was done, the taijutsu exam was next. Naruto found this part mostly dull until it was the turn of his friends. Shikamaru won against his opponent despite saying that it would have been better just to lose since it was troublesome. The others also won, except Sakura, who lost against Hinata, and Naruto against Sasuke. When Irika announced that, every girl in the class started shouting for their favorite boy to win, except Hinata, who just kept staring at Naruto. Sasuke smirked when he heard who he would fight against. "Let's see how strong you indeed are," Sasuke thought and walked to the center of the arena. Naruto walked into the arena and kept his focus on the match. Irika looked at both of them before yelling Hajime. Sasuke made the first move and rushed at him with high Genin speed. Naruto kept his focus on him and just avoided his swings. Sasuke kept rushing, but Naruto could see he was using Uchiha Taijutsu style, but he kept dodging his fists. Sasuke felt his blood boiling, so Naruto wasn't taking him seriously and just avoiding his punches as if facing a child. They kept going like that for 4 more minutes. He rushed again with all his strength, his fist directed at his face, but Naruto just moved to his left, making Sasuke turn fast to his right to try again when he felt a pain in his right leg, almost like his bone was broken. He fell on his knees but didn't yell in pain, but just clenched his teeth tightly. Irika and everyone except Naruto looked confused about what had just happened. The redhead stared down at Sasuke. "Listen, Sasuke, you will never get good if you let your anger consume you. If you keep going like this, you will have another incident like this, but next time will be against an enemy who won't have mercy," Naruto stated with a cold tone that sent shivers in everyone's body. Naruto then put his hands close to his right leg and started healing it. Sasuke kept quiet but listened to his advice. Irika now looked even more confused. How can Naruto know how to heal? He asked himself. After a few seconds, Naruto stood up, and so did Sasuke, who didn't feel pain anymore. "Winner is Naruto," Irika announced, earning shouts from the class. Naruto started walking away. "Thanks for the advice, Naruto," Sasuke suddenly said, looking down. He then looked up at the redhead. "But we are still rivals, and I will soon be better than you," he started smiling. Naruto smiled back. "I look forward to that day," he replied and walked back to the class, followed by the Uchiha. Soon it was the final exam where they needed to answer questions. Naruto looked bored, especially in this one. Mizuki started spreading the tests. He smirked and a stupid smile when he handed his test to Naruto, who seemed half asleep. Naruto felt the chakra all over the letter and just disabled the stupid genjutsu and started answering the questions. After that, they were tested in clone jutsu, transformation jutsu, and substitution jutsu. He did shadow clone jutsu, much to the surprise of Irika's sensei, Mizuki on the other hand. "But we said clone jutsu," he said, hoping there was still a way to ruin the demon's chances. Irika shook his head in denial. "No, is not stated that it should be an academy clone jutsu, that one is the easiest, that's why everyone uses it," he stated happily that Naruto passed the exam despite having no doubts that he would. Mizuki looked ready to burst into flames. No, no. I should either try myself or tell someone to try and grab the scroll for me, he thought. Naruto walked close to look at the ninja emblems. He chose the black one and walked away. "Congratulations, Naruto," Irika said smiling. "Thank you, Irika-sensei," Naruto replied and left the class. "I'm a Genin now, Ka-chan and Tu-chan, wish me luck." That's it for part 4. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.